Hi there, welcome back to our next reading of All the Young Dudes. This part will cover chapters 121 to 130. Let's dive right in. Chapter 121, 7th year, quill shopping, Friday the 9th of September, 1977. 7 years at this school, and I haven't learnt anything, Remus said as he frantically looked for the right passage in his history books. There were 12 of them open currently, and he couldn't remember which had the best counter-argument for the 1382 Pixie Relocation Act. 7 of the books lay open on the desk in front of him, taking up almost all of the space. 5 more hovered in mid-air, at eye level so that he could check for references as he went. If you haven't learnt anything, then what chance have the rest of us got? Christopher smiled peacefully from his spot on the floor. He was sitting cross-legged, books on the carpet in front of him. I haven't learnt anything useful, Remus replied impatiently, still searching. How are we defining useful? Anything that will help me pass my newts. Oh, because you really buggered up your owls. Christopher tutted sarcastically. Newts are completely different, Remus countered, finally locating the passage he needed, now losing his quill. Nastily exhausting. He found his quill behind his ear, embarrassingly enough. But now, shit! What? Christopher looked up. Lost my inkwell. You ought to get one of those self-inking quills. We can look in Hogsmeade next weekend if you fancy. Yeah, why not? Remus continued lifting books. Here, I've got a pencil if it's just note-taking. Christopher crawled underneath the desk now to find his book bag. Remus felt a bit guilty then for taking up all the space. Sorry, he said, stepping back from the madness for a moment. It's fine. It'll all be fine once we get the study group up and running again. Talking to yourself, Mooney? James and Sirius appeared in Quidditch robes. Sirius was still officially off the team, but nothing was stopping him from using the pitch on off days, and at least it kept him distracted. Merlin's wrinkly ballsack, Sirius said, staring at Remus's desk. You can't have this much homework after the first week. I'm reading around my subject, Remus replied, irritable again. Here you are, Remus. Christopher reappeared from under the table, brandishing a pencil. Cheers. Remus took it and began to scribble away onto his parchment. Oh, hello, Black. Christopher nodded politely, ducking his head. Remus glanced up, mid-scribble. Sirius was looking at Christopher with a bored kind of disdain. Hello, he nodded. He looked at Remus. Study group, is it? No, just ordinary studying today, Remus explained. But I was just saying we ought to set up a meeting soon, if people still want to do it. Of course they will, Christopher said eagerly. You got half of us through our owls last year. Yeah, Sirius said out of the blue. He looked thoughtful, which was dangerous. Yeah, I might join this year. What do you think, Prongs? Jamus looked up from the sofa where he was polishing his broom. Mate, I'm busy enough as it is. Sorry, Remus. Remus shrugged. He looked at Sirius. You'd hate being in a study group. Well, I'll never know unless I try, will I? And you're always saying it's such an important year. I've been saying that for the past 3 years, actually. And it's finally sunk in. Sirius grinned. That Sirius Black grin. Even with everything between them now, it was completely disarming. Besides, Sirius continued, looking at Christopher now, I might be able to impart some of my wisdom. Remus didn't argue it any further. He'd learnt his lesson. You couldn't tell Sirius anything, just had to let him work it out for himself. And yes, he probably wanted to join the study group because Christopher was in it. But after all, Sirius had made the choice to keep the relationship quiet. Sirius was choosing to pretend that he really did want to do homework. Remus would just go along with it. In the meantime, Remus felt as though he was limping through the first half of the term. He had not been so overwhelmed by his curriculum since his first year. Everything seemed 10 times more involved than it had been the year before, and the essay requirements were at least 10 inches longer. He felt suddenly very guilty about spending the entire summer relaxing and pleasing himself when all the while time had been ticking away. Even having dropped potions, astronomy and herbology, there was still arithmancy, history, charms, transfiguration, defence against the dark arts, and care of magical creatures, all of which seemed to have reached new heights of complexity as the final year got into full swing, not to mention the extra lessons he was taking with Madame Pumphrey. Not for the first time, Remus was extremely glad he was no longer a prefect, as he found himself spending almost all of his time squirreled away in the bowels of the library, squinting over ancient texts with dust in his hair. He stayed through his free lessons, half of his lunch break, and more often than not was still there until Madame Pince chased him out. In the end, he was thrilled to meet up with his study group again, just to have a bit of human company. "There you are." Christopher met him outside the Charms classroom after lessons on a Thursday. Professor Flitwick had been kind enough to hand over his classroom for another year. "I've no doubt you'll have a classroom of your own one day, young Lupin," the tiny teacher had squeaked cheerily. Remus blushed and did not comment. One day his secret would be out. Everyone would know why he was not fit to teach or even be in a school at all, and then what? "Here I am," Remus replied to Chris with a smile. "Were you looking for me?" "Not particularly. Just haven't seen much of you for the past week, not even in the common room." "I've been there reading for an hour a night," Remus said, "but only once the library is closed. And before Sirius came down yawning at 1 o'clock telling him to go to bed." "Admirable dedication." Christopher nodded as they entered the room and began rearranging it to their liking. "But don't go too hard, okay? Try to enjoy your last year a bit." "I enjoy studying," Remus said firmly, unpacking his books. This wasn't exactly a lie, but he knew he sounded defensive. The truth was, he knew he was working harder than he needed to, and for longer hours. But it was better than lying awake all night, worrying about the various other problems that plagued him. He still hadn't heard from Grant, though that could just be the vagaries of Muggle Post. He hadn't given any proper thought to his mother yet, though he knew he really ought to. There had been 3 reports of werewolf attacks over the summer and 1 arrest made. When it came down to it, newts were the only thing Remus thought he could really cope with at the moment. And he didn't actually think anyone had really missed him exactly. After all, they were very busy too. Lily and James had a whole host of new responsibilities on top of their new teas. Lily was taking advanced potions. James had Quidditch. Peter and Dorcas were on again, off again, but it seemed to keep him pretty occupied. And Marlene was working harder than ever this year in the lead-up to her Healer Academy entrance exams. Mary, of course, had a new boyfriend, which kept her busy. "You need a break," Christopher was saying, taking his own seat next to Remus like his second in command. "That's all I'm saying." "Okay." Remus nodded, as if he was really taking it in. It was all right for Christopher. He was a pureblood. Even if he didn't work as hard as he did, there was probably a cushy ministry job waiting for him once he finished school. If Remus worked every hour of the day and got an O in every new tea, he still didn't see much of a future beyond part-time work and depending on his friends for help. That's if Greyback didn't get him first, or if the ministry didn't lock him up. The other students began arriving so they could stop talking about it. It was a smaller group than last year, but still a good round dozen. You couldn't expect everyone to show up for the first week. Sirius did come, much to Remus's surprise and the girls' delight. "Sit here, Sirius." Martha Erickson, a 5th-year Hufflepuff, waved at him. Sirius smiled politely and acquiesced, placing himself directly opposite Remus in the horseshoe of desks. Remus nodded at him and tried not to hold eye contact for too long before gently clearing his throat and addressing the room. "Hi, everyone," he smiled, looking about. "Nice to see you all back. Shall we start by picking a subject? Anyone struggling with anything?" The 5th years were all having a bad time with astronomy, and Christopher volunteered to walk them through Eudoxus's theories on planetary movements. 3 of the 6th years were stuck on a history essay, and the 2nd years wanted help with transfiguration. "Okay," Remus said to the 6th years, "if you lot can wait a bit, I'll just get these 2 going on the transfiguration stuff first." "I can do that," Sirius said suddenly. "Really?" Remus blinked, raising a skeptical eyebrow. Really? Sirius replied coolly. I'm better at transfiguration than you anyway. Oh, okay then. The 2 second years looked very pleased to have Sirius Black, whose reputation as school rebel and general heartthrob preceded him, paying them attention, though Martha Erickson looked a bit peeved. The session, booked in for 2 hours, went very well in Remus's opinion. He tried not to hover over Sirius too much, though there was a lot of laughter and noise coming from that corner of the room. By the end, everyone seemed to have achieved whatever they had wanted to achieve, and Sirius even stayed behind to help tidy the room. "Will you be okay here?" Christopher asked Remus. "I'm supposed to be patrolling with Lily." "We'll be fine," Sirius said, with what he probably thought was a very sweet smile, but was bordering on mania. "Okay, good." Christopher gave him a haughty glance before returning to Remus. "See you Saturday for stationery shopping?" "Great, yeah. Meet you in the common room after breakfast." Remus nodded, helping Sirius push a desk back into place. "See you." As soon as the door closed, Sirius stopped what he was doing and placed his hands on his hips, scowling. "You're going to Hogsmeade with him?" "I said I would." Remus frowned, taken aback. "I need a new quill. What's the problem? I can meet you lot after we shop for quills, can't I?" "But I thought you and me would—" "I've hardly seen you this week." "We wouldn't be alone. James and Peter would be there. It's not like I'm taking anything away from you. Lily and James will be off by themselves, and Peter and Dorcas, probably." Sirius was in real danger of pouting now. Remus knew he ought to try and avoid a sulk, if he could. "You can join me and Christopher if you want," he said. Sirius grimaced. "Stationery shopping. You need quills too. The only reason I keep running out is because you pinch all of mine." "But Mooney, you're not jealous, are you?" "Of course not." Sirius shook his head and returned to the desks, using his wand to return everything to order. He sighed heavily. "I'll come stationery shopping then." Remus felt a pang of guilt. "I'll see if I can get rid of Chris after, or we could find the others and go for a drink." "I'm not going to Madame Puddifoot's," Sirius said darkly, a hint of humour returning to his face. Remus smiled and slapped him on the shoulder. "Good, or I'd have to stop fancying you." "As if you could." Sirius took his wrist and pulled him closer, kissing him hard on the lips. "Oh," Remus thought, "we haven't done this in a while." He felt really guilty then. Perhaps Sirius was right. He'd been so wrapped up in everything else he'd neglected the one thing that might have made it all a bit more bearable. They pulled apart, and Sirius glanced at the door, licking his lips. "Do you have to run off to the library or somewhere?" Remus shook his head. Sirius grinned. "Good. Colloportus." The lock in the door clicked shut. Saturday, the 17th of September, 1977. "Have you charmed your bloody curtains shut, you lunatic?" James' voice woke Remus and Sirius the Saturday of the Hogsmeade trip. Remus sat up bolt upright, eyes wide. He stared at the curtains, which shook as James attempted to get in. Sirius took a more casual approach, rolling over slowly and groaning, "Bugger off, Potter. You'll miss breakfast? Be down in a bit. Hogsmeade today, remember? Common room at 10 o'clock sharp." "Piss off, Prongs." "Charming," James muttered, but the curtains stopped shaking, and in a few moments his footsteps could be heard receding, disappearing down the stairs. Remus exhaled. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heart thudding hard, and willed it to calm down. "Christ," he breathed. "Bit jumpy there, Mooney." Sirius grinned, rolling onto his back and stretching his arms over his head. "I really need to stop falling asleep here." "You're fine. The charm held, didn't it?" "You and James have boundary issues." Remus pulled back the heavy bedclothes. "Probably. Hey, don't go." Sirius reached out for his arm. "Breakfast," Remus insisted, fishing about for his underwear. They washed, dressed, and hurried down to the great hall, just in time for the last few scraps of toast and a few dollops of porridge. "I expect it of Black, but it's not like you to miss a meal, Remus," Lily commented, skimming her copy of the Daily Prophet. "I was up late reading," Remus said. "I can have a lie-in on a Saturday if I want." "Wasn't saying you couldn't," she tutted as if he was being oversensitive. She lowered the paper. I was patrolling with Christopher Barley yesterday evening. He mentioned you were going to Hogsmeade together today. Mph? Remus looked up at her gormlessly, mouth full of toast and honey. What fresh hell? Everyone was looking at him suddenly with varying degrees of amused curiosity. He swallowed. Yeah, just to scriven shafts? I need a new quill. Get on quite well, don't you? Lily asked innocently. We do the study group together. Did he ask you, Remus? Mary joined in. What's that got to do with anything? Oh, come on, she grinned. Chris is definitely, that way. He's so camp. Is he? Remus asked uncomfortably. I hadn't noticed. We're just buying quills, nothing else. But if he fancies you... Merlin, leave him alone, will you? Sirius said hotly, glaring at both girls. Just because Christopher is... whatever, doesn't mean Mooney automatically has to go out with him. He's not that desperate. Oi, Remus said, relieved by the interruption. Who says I'm desperate at all? Exactly. Sirius nodded. See? He's not interested. Oh, but Chris is really nice, Lily said. I thought you'd make a good couple. Similar interests and whatnot. Maybe Mooney doesn't want to go out with someone similar, Sirius interjected, setting down his coffee mug a bit harder than necessary. Remus surreptitiously put a hand on his knee under the table, hoping to quiet him. Sirius glanced at him, then looked down at his plate. Thankfully, he got the message. You can't let stuff like that bother you, Remus whispered on the way back to the common room as soon as the others were out of earshot. It should bother you, Sirius replied, still wound up. Yeah, but you need to learn to be more subtle if we're going to... Oh, we're back to this again, Sirius sighed heavily. I'm sorry I'm not as good at all this undercover bullshit as you are. What? Remus stared at him. Sirius shoved his hands in his pockets and muttered, Nothing. He sped up, catching up with James and leaving Remus to walk by himself. Everything okay? Lily slowed down as James and Sirius began chattering animatedly ahead of them. Fine, Remus replied. He was in a mood now. Who did Sirius think he was, complaining about how difficult it was to keep secrets, when it was all his idea to keep the relationship quiet in the first place? He ought to just go off with Chris and ignore Sirius for the rest of the day. That would serve him right. What did he say? Lily was asking. Sirius, Lily nodded ahead at the two black-haired boys in front. Is he being a prat? Because I'll give James permission to box his ears if he's acting weird about you being... Oh, no, nothing like that. Remus waved a hand and forced on a smile. It was something else. Stupid stuff. Don't worry. Christopher was waiting in the common room, a shy smile on his face. Remus smiled back, bounding over to him. Ready? He asked brightly. Yeah, Chris nodded, excited. I've got a list of books I wanted to look for, too, if that's okay with you. I mean, if you have time, before you have to meet your friends. You're my friend too, Chris, Remus said, hoping Sirius overheard. It was a nice day out, sunny for late September, with only a very faint chill in the air, meaning that by the time the students had trekked down to the village, most of them were warm enough to have removed their heavy cloaks. Remus kept his on, because he rarely took off any layers, but Chris shrugged his off once they reached the first row of shops. Ooh, look at him. A sharp wolf whistle sounded behind them. They both spun around to see Barty Crouch and Regulus Black not far away, both snickering meanly. Ignore them, Chris muttered to Remus. They're in my potions class. They're dickheads. Come on, Remus said. Let's see your list. They passed a pleasant couple of hours together, untroubled by anyone. Remus bought one of the fancy self-inking quills, as well as an ordinary one as a backup. They went to the bookshop next, and Christopher bought so much that he had to perform a weightlessness charm on the bag just to carry it all back. My trunk's nearly full already, he laughed. What with all of the Muggle books I brought with me? Have you read Other Voices, Other Rooms? No, I didn't do much reading this summer. Everything was going pretty well, until they decided to head for the Three Broomsticks as a final stop. Remus was feeling almost like forgiving Sirius by now, having calmed down, though he was a bit apprehensive about seeing the others with Christopher. Lily said you'd told her about us coming to Hogsmeade, he said casually. Christopher furrowed his brow. Yeah, I think it just came up in conversation. You know she's one of my best friends, Remus said, hoping he didn't sound too much like he was accusing Chris of anything. So she knows I'm queer? She knows I am too, Christopher said. Or I assume she does. Most people figured it out before me, I think. Lily's a really nice girl, though. Yeah, right, Remus nodded. Thing is, I think she thought this was, like we were coming to Hogsmeade together, so just, if we see my friends, they might act a bit funny. Oh, Chris said, looking confused. Okay, would you rather we didn't go to the pub in case they're there? No, Remus said quickly. He knew he was making a pig's ear of explaining himself. I just meant, here they come. That mean voice interrupted them again. They'd just turned a corner and found their path blocked by the two sixth-year Slytherins. Oh, get lost, will you? Remus sighed impatiently. Go and find someone else to annoy. Watch out, Loony Lupin, Regulus cackled. Chrissy boy, there is a knob-gobbler. Chris turned bright red and looked at his feet. In a fit of rage, Remus withdrew his wand and adopted a duelling stance. Piss off, Black, he shouted, or I'll tell Mummy you still play Quidditch. Regulus scowled and pulled out his own wand. Yeah, another voice added, and I'll tell all your creepy mates how you wet the bed until you were 10. Sirius appeared at Remus's shoulder. Remus laughed. Is that true? Yup. Shut up, Regulus burst out angrily. He didn't go red when he was embarrassed, but turn a shade paler. Flagrante! Protego, Sirius yelled, deflecting the curse just in time. Just you wait, Regulus growled, backing away. What are you gonna do? Give me detention? Sirius laughed. I'm quaking in my boots. Run along, little brother. Regulus clenched his fists. You're no brother of mine. He spat as he turned and stalked away, Barty following him, looking annoyed that he hadn't had his own fun. Suits me, Sirius said quietly under his breath. He turned to Remus and Chris. 3 broomsticks. Chapter 1, 122, 7th year, the Mastermind. It couldn't have been a coincidence that Sirius had shown up at exactly the right moment, but Remus was so relieved at the time that he didn't bring it up. Sirius was being so friendly towards Chris, and Remus didn't want to start any kind of argument. Whatever had been up that morning had clearly been a fluke. Everything was fine. Everyone was happy. I can't believe he's still allowed to be a prefect, Lily said fiercely when she heard what had happened with Regulus. He's been worse than ever this year, and don't get me started on the Crouch kid. He gives me the creeps. She shuddered visibly, and James put a gallant arm around her shoulders. Christopher shrugged nervously. It's fine, I can handle those 2 idiots. They hadn't mentioned what Regulus had actually said during their retelling at Chris's request. Still, he looked a bit overwhelmed, sitting with all 4 marauders and the head girl in the 3 broomsticks. Christopher's own social circle was quite small and generally much quieter. Ought to teach them a lesson, Sirius said, signalling to Rosmerta for another round of butterbeer. Another one, Remus sighed under his breath. What sort of thing were you thinking, Pads? James leaned over, excited. I'd need to think very hard, Sirius said, stroking his chin thoughtfully, like an old professor. We haven't done a prank in ages, Peter put in, eyes gleaming. Not since, the bubo-tuber puffballs, Remus provided, sipping his drink. It's best if you just cover your ears, Christopher, Lily advised wryly. There's no stopping them once they're in planning mode. Remus poked out his tongue at her. It was true enough. He was already starting to get those familiar butterflies in his stomach that he always did when the marauders embarked on a new mission. You wouldn't hurt anyone, would you? Chris looked anxiously at Sirius and James, who were doing their telepathic communication thing, grinning at each other like loons and waggling their eyebrows. What are you looking at us for? Sirius winked. Mooney's the dangerous one. How dare you? Remus replied, smirking. Everyone knows that you 3 lead me astray. Anyway, it's 7th year, and we've done everything there is to do. Have some imagination, James said. I can't believe I'm hearing this from the boy who once literally changed time just for a laugh. That was you, Chris yelped, looking affronted. Remus tutted. I did not literally do anything. We mucked about with the clocks. When you were 11, Sirius said, you single-handedly organized and implemented a full-scale itching powder attack on the Slytherin boys. Rosehip seeds, Remus corrected. And, Peter added, bouncing excitedly, you were the one who perfected the soap expansion spell when we blew up all the toilets in second year. Okay, yeah, I helped with that. It was a team effort. Remus, wasn't it you who invented that word-swapping spell to stop the Slytherins using insults? Lily asked, smiling sweetly at him, tongue between her teeth. Oh, I like that one. Chris cheered up a bit. I didn't invent it. Remus said, I just, did the research. See, James said to Christopher, Mooney is our criminal mastermind. Without him, we wouldn't be the legends we are today. Christopher stared at Remus, evidently seeing him in a completely new light. Remus sighed heavily. I hate you all. Does that mean you'll help us with another prank? Yes. I'll help too, Chris said suddenly, looking happier than he had in hours. Oh, for goodness sake, Lily groaned. I suppose someone had better monitor you lot, if only for health and safety. I'm in. Excellent, James beamed. Remus smiled back at them all, trying to ignore the feeling of anxiety growing in his chest. Monday the 3rd of October, 1977. Dear Remus, sorry I did not write sooner. I've been very busy. Sorry too for my bad writing. I'm at my Aunt Val's pub in Hove and it's very nice. She's letting me work here and stay in her spare room, but I will move out on my own when I have some money saved. I hope you will come to see me when you can. You can ring me on the number at the bottom if you like. I hope school is okay. I hope Siri, your friend with the long hair, is taking care of you as well as you took care of me. Lots of love from Grant Chapman. P.S. Did you hear that Mark Bolan died? It was a car crash. I thought of you when I heard, and I hoped you was not too sad. Remus held the letter, written on a bit of narrow-ruled paper torn from an exercise book, and sighed with relief. He folded it neatly and slipped it in his pocket, grinning to himself. Grant was safe. Grant was safe. Who was that from? James asked, catching Remus's smile. A friend from St. Edmund's S, Remus replied easily. Sirius looked up and Remus gave a very slight nod. Sirius smiled too. Remus cleared his throat and returned to his breakfast. Mark Bolan died. Oh no, Mary, Lily and Sirius said in unison. Who's... James started. The singer from T. Rex. Oh yeah, wasn't that the Muggle band you two were obsessed with in first year? Mary tutted, rolling her eyes. Bloody purebloods. Oi, Sirius said, nudging her with his elbow. That's really crap news, though. Hey, I know what we should do. No, Lily said suddenly. I know that look, Black. What? He painted on his most innocent expression. Lily was not fooled. No parties. Oh, come on, Evans, it's for... I'll tell you what I told James. She shook her head. Birthdays are fine, but not during exams and not this early in the year. Prongs? Sirius glared at his friend. James looked awkward. Sorry, mate, I did agree to that. You know, head boy and everything. Betrayal! Sirius pointed at him dramatically. Treachery? Treason? All right, calm it down. Lily stood up. I'm letting you have your birthday, aren't I? Leave James alone. You off? James looked up at her. Potions, she replied. I want to get there early to ask Slughorn something. I'll walk you. James stood up too, eagerly. Sirius frowned, but James was oblivious. He took Lily's hand, and without looking away from her, See you in a bit, Pads, and see you at lunch, Mooney. See ya, Remus nodded, reaching for some more toast. Sirius stared after the couple as they left the hall, heads bent close as they chatted happily. Can you believe that? What? Remus buttered his toast and mused on the merits of honey versus jam. Prong's not wanting a party. Well, it's quite early in the year. This time last year he'd have been all for it. It's her. Oh dear, Mary laughed. I know what's wrong with you, Mr. Black. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm the same as I ever was. It's... Exactly. She arched her eyebrow at him. You never change. You're jealous. Pfft. Sirius folded his arms and slouched down in his seat. His legs stretched out under the table and bumped against Remus's, as if I would be jealous of him. Not of James, Mary rolled her eyes. You're jealous of Lily. She's taken your best friend away and now you're feeling neglected, right? Sirius went very quiet. He looked down, then back up at Mary. No, he said, very fiercely, getting up. I'm going to potions, he muttered, stalking off, away from the breakfast table. Mary sighed deeply, in that girls did when they thought boys were being particularly dense. Honestly, she tutted, you agree with me, don't you, Remus? Remus shrugged. He just wanted to eat his breakfast in peace. Mary tutted at him too. Boys, she said, exasperated. Emotional cripples, the lot of you. Right, I've got a free this morning going to the library. You? Yeah, but I had something else I wanted to do. Suit yourself, she smiled, getting up and leaving too. Finally alone, Remus's mind began to work, the beginnings of an idea forming. He didn't disagree with Lily exactly. The parties were a massive distraction and not really fair on everyone else, but at the same time, he hated seeing Sirius's excitement quashed, particularly by James, who had always been a wholly positive force in his life. He couldn't help but feel that he, Remus, ought to be able to do something to cheer Sirius up. After all, he'd done madder things before. But what to do? To distract himself, he reread Grant's letter as he finished eating, then wrote a quick response. Dear Grant, thanks for your letter. I'm so glad everything is going well with your aunt. I would love to come and see you at Christmas, if not then, over the summer maybe. I will try to call as soon as I am able to, hopefully the first weekend in November. Crap news about Bolan. Thanks for telling me. We get no news here. Speak soon, Remus. He'd send it to the Potters first thing. It hadn't solved the Sirius problem, though. Remus had such a strong sense that he needed to do something, a gesture. Not romantic exactly, but dramatic. He wanted to do something by himself, something that would make Sirius proud of him. This wasn't a secret, Remus told himself, not in the usual sense. It was a surprise, a present. But what? Just as Remus was getting up to leave the hall, Emmeline Vance wafted past in a haze of sweet perfume and blonde hair. Something clicked in Remus's brain, and he jogged to catch her up. Hey, Emmeline, can I ask you a favour? Friday the 7th of October, 1977. It had taken all week between lessons and homework, but Remus had finally cracked it in time for Friday morning. It was a bit mad, which was why he hadn't told anyone about it. They might think it was a bit strange, going so far over the top just to cheer Sirius up, but it just seemed so worthwhile at the time, making Sirius happy. Emmeline's instructions had been relatively clear, but Remus had made some of his own tweaks for good measure. He had paid her off with the last of his tobacco and sworn her to secrecy. Though she'd said she wouldn't tell anyway because she liked the idea so much, she loved Mark Bolan too. The next few days he spent doing preliminary work in the library, hidden at his favourite desk near one of the back windows, where the light was good. Friday morning he woke early, earlier than James even, borrowed the invisibility cloak, and made sure everything was in place. He made a mental note to get better at setting timing spells, as he yawned his way through the halls, tapping each portrait, statue and suit of armour with his wand. By the time everyone else was beginning to wake up, Remus had finished and was snoozing in an armchair in the common room. "Morning, Mooney," James woke him cheerily, in full Quidditch kit, broom in hand. "Morning." "See you in, Charms," he called as he exited through the portrait hole. Remus sat up straight and listened intently. Quiet footsteps, James whistling. Then, yes, the fat lady began to sing in a high falsetto. "Ride it on out like a bird in the sky ways. Ride it on out like you were a bird. Fly it all out like an eagle in a sunbeam. Ride it on out like you were a bird." "What the fuck?" James exclaimed. Remus grinned and punched the air. It worked. The rest of the morning was delightful chaos. Every portrait in the castle had begun to sing Ride a White Swan, on repeat. And not just the portraits. Every radio, gramophone, record player, statue, anything that could make a noise was now tunefully blaring Mark Bolan's greatest hit. The best part was that most of the Muggle-born students were singing along too, as it was such a catchy song. The racket was so bad in the end that McGonagall announced lessons would be cancelled for the day while the teachers worked out how to stop the singing. Remus had added a security measure, which meant that silencio only resulted in a volume increase. Sirius was thrilled, of course. "Who do you think did it?" Peter asked excitedly at the breakfast table. In the background, some sixth-year girls were chanting along with the tinny baritone of the armour. "Wear a tall hat like a druid in the old days. Wear a tall hat and a tattooed gown. Ride a white swan like the people of the Beltane. Wear your hair long, babe, you can't go wrong." "I don't need to think, I know," Sirius said smugly. Remus smiled. Mary leaned over eagerly. "Who?" "Prongs, obviously," Sirius said, "probably trying to make it up to me about the party." Remus's stomach sank. The idiot. "Blimey," Mary said. "James? By himself?" She looked sceptical. Good old Mary. "Amazing, right?" Sirius kept saying. "I didn't even think Prongs knew any T-Rex songs." Remus said irritably. "Funny thing, that." "What's up with you?" Mary nudged him. "I thought you liked T-Rex." "I do," Remus replied, tight-lipped. He stood up. "If lessons are cancelled, I suppose I'll go and catch up on some homework." Sirius looked up, confused. "I thought we were going to, play chess?" Remus shrugged. "I'm not in the mood." He left quickly, before his annoyance became too obvious. He did go to the library, of course. It was the only quiet place in the castle, but he couldn't concentrate on anything. Plus, someone had dared to sit in his favourite seat. They were only 2 second years and Gryffindors, too. If he wanted to play the Marauder card, he could easily get them to move. But he was in the mood to suffer in silence, so he picked a lesser desk. Someone had carved something into the wood. Who knew how long ago? Everything in this damn castle was so old. It was a poem, a few lines of adolescent doggerel. "Never kiss your lover at the garden gate. Love is blind, but your neighbours ain't." Remus snorted despite himself. Stupid, didn't even rhyme properly. "All right, Moody." Remus looked up to see Sirius sauntering towards him, weaving smoothly between the big study desks. A group of girls sitting behind Remus tittered noisily. Remus slouched down further in his seat, folding his arms. "I'm busy," he grunted, flipping open the nearest book to a random page. You look it." Sirius grabbed a chair, spun it around and straddled it, folding his arms along the back and rested his chin on them, staring at Remus in that annoying way, with that annoying grin. "Go away," Remus said, looking at his book. "Mooney." Sirius smiled. "It was you, wasn't it?" Remus shrugged. Sirius snorted. "You twat, why didn't you just say so?" "Didn't feel like it." "Okay, I don't know. Could it be that you are completely mental, in addition to being a moody git?" "Bugger off." Remus was starting to smile. He hated that Sirius could always do that. Sirius gave a little sigh. "You know, Mooney, if you insist on being so secretive all the time, misunderstandings will happen." "I know." Remus felt uncomfortable. He wasn't used to Sirius being the logical one. "Sorry." His shoulders sank, and he looked down nervously. "Do you like it, though?" "Of course I like it, you idiot!" Sirius exclaimed, slapping his hand in the desk. "It's incredible, Remus. Thank you, Sirius pinked slightly. "I really love it." "You do?" Remus looked up at him. "I do. I've always loved your magic. It's so you." "Shut up." Remus felt himself blushing. It was even harder not to smile. Every muscle in his face was conspiring against him. He kicked Sirius's foot under the table. Sirius kicked him back. Chapter 123, 7th Year, Darkness Falls. Friday the 4th of November 1977. 2 a.m. in Gryffindor Tower. "I think there's something to the colour-changing idea," James slurred, using his goblet to gesture wildly. Thankfully it was empty and didn't spill. "Nah, it's too obvious." Sirius shook his head, just as drunk as James, but handling himself remarkably well for once. "Besides," Lily yawned from where she sat on the floor, head nodding against James's knee. "What do we change? Their robes?" "Their whole dormitory," Mary suggested, the only one still dancing, winding her arms slowly over her head and rolling her hips to a sultry Nina Simone track. "Complete makeover, bright pink." "Why pink, though?" Sirius said. "Some people might like pink." Ha! On your own, Black. Marlene pulled a face at him. She was sitting upside down in an armchair, her legs dangling over the back, long blonde hair touching the floor. Her eyes were fixed on Mary, moving in front of the fireplace. They were the last few standing after Sirius's 18th birthday party, which had been as uproarious and over the top as usual. The only non-seventh year remaining was Christopher, who looked like he was struggling to keep his eyes open but held on valiantly, taking notes for the Slytherin prank which they were currently brainstorming. How would we even get hold of their robes, though? Peter asked, fiddling with the label on his beer bottle. We had the same problem in first year, remember? With the itching powder. Oh, yeah, James nodded. That's right. It was easier to sneak into their common room than it was to work out how the house elves organized the laundry. How did you sneak in? Marlene asked, frowning. You can't have perfected an invisibility spell by the age of 11? Ask us no questions, and we shall tell you no lies, McKinnon. Sirius winked at her. He was watching Mary dance too, his eyes shining with intoxication. Anyway, we've decided not to do it. You decided, James corrected. It's my birthday. Not anymore, it isn't. Peter threw a cushion at him. Sirius threw one back, then James launched another, and soon enough they were all drunkenly flinging cushions back and forth, giggling dopily. Right, Marlene laughed after deflecting a big round velvet one. I'm off to bed. She placed her hands on the carpet and flipped forward neatly. She brushed her jeans as she got up, a bit wobbly on her feet, then headed for the girls' dorm. No, Mary grabbed her around the waist. Don't go, Miles. Dance with me. Marlene laughed lightly, but Remus caught an odd flash of annoyance in Marlene's usually placid face as she gently unwound herself from Mary and backed away. I'm sure one of the boys will oblige, she said shortly. Night all. Night, they chorused back. Remus vaguely wondered what was going on between the two best friends, but he was too drunk and sleepy to dwell on it very long. I think I'll go up too. Christopher was already on his feet, as though he had been waiting for someone else to admit defeat so that he wasn't the first. Don't decide anything without me, though. I really don't think anyone's going to formulate a plan tonight. Lily yawned again. See you tomorrow, Chris. Night. The younger boy waved at all of them in his awkward, cheery way. If no one wants to dance with me, Mary sighed, moving to turn off the record player, I suppose I'd better get in some beauty sleep too. And me, Peter got up, tossing back the dregs of his drink. And me. Lily was getting up when James pulled her into his lap, hugging her close. Don't go yet. She curled into him sleepily, and they became one unit, cocooned in the big leather armchair. Remus blinked at them blearily and marvelled once again that they had all teased James for years about his certainty that he and Lily were made for each other. Funny how things work out. Absolutely obscene, Sirius tutted, pulling a face at the couple. Well, if that's the way this party's going, I'll follow Wormtail's example. Coming, Mooney? Yep. Remus got up off the sofa they had been sharing, maintaining a polite and inconspicuous distance as they had done all evening. They followed Peter up and found he was locked in the bathroom, noisily brushing his teeth and gargling. Remus was exhausted and sat on the end of his bed to wait, yawning and rubbing his eyes. Good birthday? He asked Sirius. Brilliant, Sirius grinned back. Good. If we wait until Pete's asleep. Bad idea, Padfoot, especially if James isn't back yet. Anyway, I'm knackered. He yawned again, as if to prove his point. Another time. This was a bit of a white lie. After too many near misses, Remus had been trying to limit the amount of time he spent in Sirius's bed. It seemed so sneaky and dishonest. Another time, Sirius sighed. It's my birthday, and I've barely seen you. I've been here all day. This was true, of course, but it was true of all of the marauders and Lily. You know what I mean. Sirius shook his head impatiently. Remus did know, but he didn't have a response that would please Sirius. This same issue kept coming up, and quite frankly, Remus was getting sick of it, especially as there was no possible way to solve it until Sirius finally made his mind up. Tired and getting more irritable by the second, Remus got up and began to change quickly into his pyjamas. Sirius stood up and came over to him, crossing the beam of moonlight, streaking the ancient floorboards. "You're not avoiding me, are you?" he asked. "No," Remus muttered. "I'm just busy. I've got a lot on." If he'd said it once, he'd said it 1,000 times. "Okay," Sirius said slowly. "Just, Lily and James are busy too, but they still seem to find time to—" "We're not Lily and James, though, are we?" Remus raised his eyebrow, honestly. Sirius looked hurt. "No, but—" "That was your decision," Remus said, buttoning his nightshirt. "What was it you said? Not to scream it from the rooftops? I thought you wanted it this way." Sirius looked lost. Remus rolled his eyes, exasperated. "You said you needed time. I'm giving it to you. But you can't keep whinging about it." Sirius withdrew. Remus knew he had won, but there was no joy in the victory. Fortunately, Peter chose that moment to exit the bathroom. He made a beeline for his bed, head down, waving a lazy hand at them. "Night, lads." "Night, Pete," they both replied cheerily. Saturday, the 26th of November, 1977. They could get over little tiffs like that in those days. They could wake up the next morning and both be ready to wipe the slate clean, at least until the next time. In the end, their desire for each other, their affection, and most of all their friendship, seemed strong enough to win out over any other problems. It was a state of being that Remus would later learn they were taking very much for granted. On top of this, there was a war on, which may have explained quite a bit. Everyone was slightly melodramatic, and nerves were raw all round. The headlines weren't helping. Ministry raids 3 houses in search for forbidden artifacts. 3rd vampire attack in 2 weeks. Minister Jenkins steps down in wake of disappearances. Werewolf registry dangerously undermanaged. Ministry insiders reveal. And that was only this week's papers. Something was going on with the Slytherins too, more than the usual classist nonsense. Over the summer, or perhaps before that, a new hierarchy seemed to have formed, creating obvious divisions in the most controversial Hogwarts house. Regulus Black had always carried a certain amount of clout, of course. The heir to the most noble, exclusive and wealthy pure-blood family had been popular amongst his ambitious peer group since his very first day of school. In turn, he had surrounded himself with a faction of pure-blood students who seemed to grow nastier by the year. Except for Barty Crouch Jr., perhaps, who had been incredibly nasty even as a little boy. Now, in his 6th year, Regulus did nothing to dispel the rumours that he was not only a Death Eater, but in regular communication with Lord Voldemort himself. In fact, Regulus seemed to rather enjoy his increased powers, which, according to Christopher, who shared several classes with him, even some of the teachers were observing. He held himself differently. He walked with his back straight, his chin raised, a permanent smirk affixed to his pale face. Remus could hardly recognize the nervous, troubled boy that Sirius had once called Reggie. Regulus was not stupid. He had never once had a detention in all his time at school, and was as bright as his older brother when it came to his lessons. Still, unpleasant things seemed to happen to everyone around him. A 4th-year Hufflepuff who, rumour had it, knocked over an inkwell on Regulus's desk while he was studying in the library, was found 2 days later locked in a broom cupboard in the dungeons, white as a sheet and completely mute. He had been sent home to recover and had not been seen since. The Ravenclaw Quidditch team practice overran by half an hour one afternoon due to a mix-up with the rota, meaning that the Slytherin team's practice had to be pushed back to the following day. The next time the Ravenclaws met, they had to cancel their practice altogether, as well as postpone an upcoming match with Gryffindor because nobody was able to touch their brooms without receiving hundreds of tiny splinters, which could only be removed by Madame Pumphrey, and the words "Mudbloods get out" had been magically carved into the chalkboard in the Muggle Studies classroom, so that the lessons had to be moved while the teachers investigated. Of course, no one ever questioned Regulus, and, as there were no witnesses to any of these crimes, nothing could be done. Everybody knew, though, everybody with any stake in the war. The increasing cruelty and prevalence of such attacks had thrown a shadow over the castle, which every student felt now, if they hadn't in previous years. It might have been the reason that so many people wanted to help the marauders plan their next prank, though that also had a lot to do with Christopher. "Did you tell everyone?" Remus sighed, exasperated, as a third year scuttled out of the study room, flushed and grinning after offering his services to the cause. "I blow stuff up all the time in potions," he had explained, without a trace of irony. Remus had assured him that James and Sirius would be thrilled to hear it. "I just mentioned it to a friend," Christopher replied sheepishly. "You know, a lot of people have got it in for Slytherin, and it's always a good idea to get a wide range of experience." "The marauders do not outsource their pranks," Remus sniffed haughtily as they made their way back towards the tower. "It's not outsourcing," Christopher countered. "It's, collaboration." "We don't collaborate either." "Why not? Isn't that what we're supposed to be fighting for? Inclusion?" "Inclusion, yes. Equality, yes. Prank planning cooperatives? No." Christopher snorted with laughter. Remus smiled. Christopher had an awkward, braying laugh like a donkey. It was pretty glorious to witness. "So," Christopher wheezed, catching his breath and wiping his eyes, "what are your Christmas plans? Staying here again?" Maybe, or going to the Potters. All hangs on whether or not James is going to spend it with Lily's family." "Oh, Merlin, don't," Christopher pulled a face. "I think I preferred it when they hated each other. Prefect meetings are so boring now. They spend the whole time talking each other up. Enough to give you toothache." "I think it's nice," Remus said. "James has been bonkers about Lily since second year. If he can finally tell her how amazing she is instead of telling us, then all the better." "Yeah, I suppose you're right. We should all be so lucky." Christopher sighed. They were quiet for a bit after that, just walking together. As they turned the next corner, Remus realized that they hadn't passed anyone in a while. Fair enough, it was a Saturday, but it wasn't a Hogsmeade weekend, and the weather was too poor for anyone to be outside. Finally, a first year came hurrying towards them through an archway which led to the east wing. Her eyes were big and frightened. She looked up at the two older boys. "Ooh," she squeaked, "don't go down there, it's horrid," and ran past them, presumably back to her house. Chris and Remus looked at each other. Chris licked his lips, then squared his shoulders slightly, setting his mouth. "I am a prefect, so I'll come with you." Remus patted his shoulder. Christopher nodded, looking very relieved. Remus wished James was there, or Sirius. They walked side by side through the archway and found themselves enveloped in total darkness. It was the middle of the afternoon, and Remus knew there were usually windows on this corridor, and even at night it was never this dark. Something was very wrong. "Lumos," they both whispered, lighting their wand tips and holding them up, casting beams of white light across the grey flagstones, the blood-red tapestries, the glinting suits of armour. It seemed empty. Christopher took a brave step ahead of Remus, clearing his throat. "Hello? Is anyone here?" he called. No response, utter silence. Christopher turned around to look at Remus, squinting and raising an arm to his eyes against the brightness of Remus's wand light. "Perhaps you ought to go for a teacher." "Come back with me then," Remus said. There was a noise, a nasty, crawling, slimy squelch just ahead of Christopher. They both whipped around and aimed their lights at it, but found only an empty corner. Christopher's heart was pounding hard. He reeked of adrenaline and terror. "There's something in here," he whispered fearfully. "Come on," Remus said. "Let's go and get help." "I think it's over there." Christopher walked forward again, and Remus lost sight of him and had to go by smell. This was particularly disconcerting. Remus had never met a darkness so black that he could not see through it. "Chris!" He reached forward, casting his light about. "I've found it. It's... No, oh Merlin, no, no!" Christopher began to scream, somewhere further up the hall. Without thinking, Remus bolted forward, following the terrible wails. "Chris!" He almost tripped over him. Christopher was curled up on the floor, hands covering his head, rocking and sobbing. "What?" Remus asked, trembling now as Christopher pointed at it. Remus used his wand to follow his friend's shaking arm, finally throwing light on their tormentor. Remus almost screamed too. A corpse, a horrible, rotting, shambling corpse, was stumbling towards them through the velvet blackness. It slumped forward with a heavy stoop, reaching for Christopher. The eyes were intact, yellow and red, both vacant and ravenous. It still had most of its skin, a grotesque palette of mottled grey and deep bruised purple. It moaned, a ghastly, rattling sound through crooked yellow teeth. Remus raised his wand and stood in front of Chris. He was about to fire a knockback jinx at it, the only thing he could think of at short notice, when it fixed its hungry eyes on him. In a second, it vanished. Remus blinked, gasping, and suddenly the hallway was filled with a pale, milky light as a full moon rose before him. The scream died in his throat, and he was gripped with horror. How was it possible? The moon was not due for a week. He had to run. He had to get away from Christopher. But wait a minute. I know what you are. Remus's terror turned to elation as he raised his wand once more and shouted out confidently, "Ridiculous!" The moon began to expand and transform once more, this time into a huge white beach ball which began to bounce and spring off the walls before bursting into a cloud of soapy bubbles. Remus laughed, as loudly as he could under the circumstances, and the boggart retreated. He took his chance and grabbed Christopher, still curled up, eyes closed tight, under the arm, dragging him back towards the archway as fast as he could. They came out the other side, gasping and blinking hard in the light. Christopher was gripping Remus's robes tightly, his breathing heavy, face ashen. "Fuck," Remus murmured, feeling pretty shaky himself. That was a boggart?" Christopher stuttered. Yeah, it was. I've never seen one before, have you?" Chris shook his head. Remus patted his hands, willing him to let go. "Hey, it's okay. It wasn't real, remember? Come on, we have to tell someone, before anyone else runs into it." "I'll go," Chris said, getting some of his courage back. "I'll go now. Are you okay to wait here, in case someone comes?" "Of course," Remus nodded. "No one's getting past me." He grinned, trying to make light of it, but Christopher was still too shaken. He nodded grimly and set off, still gripping his wand. Alone, Remus reached into his deep robe pockets and pulled out the Marauder's map. He'd had it on him for a while now, out of concern that James might take a look one day and wonder which he and Sirius were sharing the bathroom so often. "I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good," he whispered, tapping the parchment. The map immediately sprang to life, ink spreading like vines across the page. Remus held it up to his eyes and frantically searched for the corridor with the boggart. There it was, and there he was, Remus Lupin, clearly marked out at one end. He followed the length of it with his finger. It was completely empty. Apparently boggarts did not show up. Not enough substance, maybe. He reached the end. There was a second archway on the other side, he remembered, covered by a tapestry. 3 people were waiting there, quite still. Barty Crouch Jr., Garrick Mulciber and... Remus's stomach sank, though he was not all that surprised. Here it was, proof in black and white. Regulus Black. Chapter 1, 124, 7th Year Christmas. Part 1. In a miserable twist of fate, the December 1977 full moon fell on Christmas Day. The Marauders all agreed to stay at Hogwarts for the duration, with a plan to travel back to the Potters on Boxing Day. Lily made them all promise that they would meet up as soon as possible in Diagon Alley. "It's the only place my parents will let me go by myself," she explained to Remus. "I wanted to come to the Potters too, but they're protective and they haven't met James yet." "Why not invite James to yours?" Remus suggested. Lily bit her lip and shrugged. "It's just a bit tricky, maybe for Easter break." It was a cheerless Christmas, really. James was missing Lily. Peter obviously wished he was at home, not stuck at school. Sirius was anxious and jittery whenever he and Remus were in the same room with someone else, and Remus himself was grumpy and irritable, waiting for the moon to take hold. They didn't do anything very Christmassy either, other than go down for lunch with the other students who had stayed. They had promised Mrs. Potter not to exchange gifts until they could all be together. "I feel awful," Remus sighed as he wound his scarf around his neck, ready to start heading towards the shack ahead of his friends. "You lot should be at home. I could have stayed by myself, or used your attic again, Prongs." "Don't be silly," James shook his head manfully. "I know how bad it is for you in the attic, tied down like that. The shack is the best place. At least we can all run about a bit." And he was right, of course. They all needed a good run, and in the morning Remus woke up and looked at his friends' rosy, grinning faces, and knew they all felt much better for it. They couldn't leave immediately, of course. Madame Pumphrey would not allow it. Remus was prescribed his usual morning of sleep, and he hoped that the other marauders had taken the opportunity to do the same. When he woke up in the infirmary, Sirius was sitting in the chair next to him, grinning, 2 suitcases at his feet. "Ready when you are," he said cheerfully, and Remus felt a pang of guilt again. Sirius needed to get home to the Potters just as much as James did. "Have you packed for me?" Remus sat up, blinking. "Blimey." "Of course I haven't," Sirius snorted. "Prongs did. I made sure he got the book on your bedside table, though." Remus opened his mouth to speak, but Sirius raised a hand. "And the one under your pillow. Don't worry, Moony. Nothing gets past me." "Cheers," Remus smiled. "Just let me get dressed then." "Sure you'll be okay to flew?" Sirius asked, as Remus swiveled out of the bed, his bare feet landing on the cold flagstones. He felt a bit weak and woozy, but no worse than usual. He nodded. "Yeah, apparated after a full moon once, remember?" "Okay, but you should say, if you don't feel up to it." "I will. Pass my jeans, will you?" Sirius complied. Remus dressed slowly, checking his body with every stretch and turn, making sure everything was working as it should be. He was starving hungry, but willing to wait for Mrs. Potter's cooking. "Where are the others?" Remus asked, bending now to tie his shoelaces. "Common room," Sirius replied. He held up his silver compact mirror. "I'm to let Prongs know when we're on our way to McGonagall's office. They'll meet us." "Great," Remus nodded. He stopped for a moment, dizzy again, and pretended to just be stretching. "Moony?" Remus began his second shoe, concentrating very hard. "I'm going to tell Prongs over Christmas." "What?" He straightened up so suddenly that he had to grab Sirius's arm to stop from wobbling over. His head swam, and he blinked a few times while equilibrium restored itself. "Tell Prongs?" "Yeah." Sirius looked very pale, his eyes big. "If it's okay with you, I think I'd better." "Of course. Yeah, I mean, wow, why now?" Sirius shrugged. "Something's got to give, and I'm mental about you." Remus's face grew hot and he looked away. He nudged Sirius's toe with his own. "Shut up." "Never." Sirius poked his tongue out. "So it's okay?" "Yeah, of course it is. Will you let me know when?" "Definitely. I want to pick the right time." "Okay. I'll go and get Pumphrey now, shall I?" "Cheers." And with that, Sirius jumped up and disappeared behind the screen. Remus sat still for a few minutes, stunned. Well, people could always surprise you. Boxing Day afternoon at the Potters was a welcome change of pace. Euphemia wanted to know all about Lily, and Fleamont wanted to know how the new Gryffindor Quidditch lineup was working out. This led to a very long and involved argument between Peter, Sirius, James and his father as they complained about the poor new chaser, something Ericsson, and fretted over whether or not this would be the end to Gryffindor's 6-year winning streak. In the end, Remus and Euphemia abandoned them to this and went into the kitchen to help Gully with the washing up. Mrs. Potter pulled up a seat for Remus by the sink and said, "You just sit there, my love, and you can dry. Don't want you on your feet all evening, or you'll never get up tomorrow." And it sounds like the boys have a lot planned. They worked away in companionable silence for a while. Remus practiced several drying spells before giving up and just using a dishcloth. Maybe he would never be any good at domestic incantations. "Comes with practice," Euphemia smiled. Her face was soft in the twinkle of the fairy lights, and though she looked tired and older than Remus had remembered her, she looked content and homely, just as a mother should look in his mind. "Mrs. Potter." "Yes, dear. You knew my dad, didn't you?" "Lyle?" "A little bit, but not well. Monty knew him better. They crossed paths at the ministry once or twice, And I believe they were both partial to a few Friday night pints in the leaky cauldron. She clucked her tongue indulgently. What about Hope? Euphemia set down the plate she'd been about to hand over and looked down at him. He swallowed. Hope Lupin? My mother. She was a muggle. Yes, I know, dear. I only met her once. But you met her? He stared at James's mother, amazed. Why had it never occurred to him before? She pulled off her bright yellow marigolds and sat down in the chair beside him. We were only introduced. We were both pregnant at the time. That's the only reason I remember. She was a lot younger than me and, as you say, a muggle. We moved in different circles, I suppose. Lyle was a very private man. What was she like? Remus asked desperately. Was she nice? Oh, Remus. Euphemia reached over and took his hand, which was cold from the dishes and felt a bit too familiar. He didn't want to upset her, though, so he let her do it. She was very nice from what I remember. Mousy little thing, blonde hair and a lovely smile. Very small, I remember thinking, though next to Lyle, anyone looked small. I don't remember what the occasion was, but we were both enormous. I remember her telling me she was expecting in March. I told her to get in touch if she needed anything, but I'm afraid she never did. Perhaps she didn't know how to do it. Remus looked down. If he had made it through his childhood unscathed, perhaps in time his mother might have made more friends. Perhaps she would have befriended Mrs. Potter, and perhaps they would all have spent Christmases together. I was given a letter, Remus said slowly. When I turned 17, she wrote it, Hope, before giving me away. She said in it, she said I might try to find her. Is that what you'd like? I don't know, maybe she's changed her mind by now. Remus, Euphemia said very fiercely, I can promise you she hasn't. If you want to look for your mother, then just give me the word. Monty can do it in a trice. Remus looked up finally and smiled. Thank you. He went to bed early and was woken by Sirius, creeping in under the covers. The house had grown quiet, and it was very dark out. Sorry, Sirius whispered, smelling faintly of brandy and warm all over as he wound his arms around Remus. Didn't mean to wake you up. Yeah, you did, Remus murmured sleepily. Haven't told Prongs yet, then? Nah, Sirius shook his head against Remus's arm, burying his face under the duvet. I thought tomorrow. After Diagon Alley, before dinner. Okay. Remus sighed, closing his eyes and settling back to sleep. Just before he drifted off, he whispered, You better set an alarm of something then, so you can get back to your own bed before... But no, Sirius had fallen sound asleep. Tuesday, the 27th of December, 1977. Come on, hurry up! James was bellowing up the stairs as Remus searched for his woolly hat. Calm down, you lunatic. We're almost ready, Sirius yelled back from the landing where he was rearranging his parting in the full-length mirror. No shouting in the house, boys, Euphemia called from the kitchen. I can't find it. Did you pack it? Remus huffed, hanging off his doorframe. I told you, I left packing to Prongs. Oh, Prongs! You forgot Mooney's hat, you bastard. I asked you to help me. James shouted back. You said I had everything under control. I assumed you did. Sorry, Mooney. It's okay, Prongs. Remus joined in, a bit embarrassed. I'll go without, he said. It's not that cold. Have mine, Sirius shrugged, tossing his head again, still eyeing himself in the mirror. I don't want to muck up my hair anyway. Axio hat. Sirius's red woolen hat, emblazoned with a Gryffindor lion, came shooting out of the rubbish tip he called a bedroom, and Remus grabbed it from the air and rammed it down on his head. Okay, let's go. Finally, James met them at the bottom of the stairs, where he had been waiting for a good half an hour now. Where's Wormtail? Sent an owl. Doesn't feel like it, apparently. Grumpy git. Yeah, well, for once I don't blame him for not wanting to flew to London on a winter's day just to see you and Evan snog, Sirius teased. That's not all we do. James's ears turned red. Anyway, if that's true, why are you and Mooney coming? I want some new books and he's a voyeur, Remus shrugged. Come on, let's go, shall we? Remus remembered to keep his eyes and mouth closed this time, and liked to think that he arrived in the fireplace of the leaky cauldron with some dignity, even if he had tripped over the cast-iron grate. Luckily, he stumbled straight into Lily's arms as she had been anxiously awaiting their arrival. "Oof!" she yelped, staggering but just about keeping upright. "Hiya, Remus!" "Hi," he laughed, getting his own balance. "My hero." "Too late, Prongs," Sirius said, brushing himself off as he stepped neatly over the grate. "You've lost her to a better man already." "It was inevitable, I suppose." James grinned, following him out. Lily let go of Remus immediately and flung herself at James, who looked thrilled to bits. They managed to find a table to sit at in the crowded pub and ordered 4 butterbeers. "Busy, isn't it?" Remus said, raising his voice over the din as he pushed through the throngs of shoppers with the drinks. "Sales," Lily said casually. "Oxford Street's just as bad. I was there with Mum this morning." "Anyone here we know?" Sirius asked, raising his head to look about at the faces. Not really. I did see Frank earlier. Do you remember Frank Longbottom? He was head boy in our first year," Lily said, before ducking her head and focusing on her drink and James's hand, which was on her hip and snaking slowly underneath her green wool jumper. Once they had finished their drinks, they were all keen to get out of the noisy, overwarm pub and into the fresh air. The street, however, was just as packed. It seemed to Remus that the entire wizard population of Britain must be crammed into these few crooked streets, all wrapped up in heavy winter robes, carrying bags and baskets and boxes, cheerily wishing each other Merry Christmas, or else rudely barging through the hustle and bustle to get to the shop they wanted. "Try to stay together," James threw over his shoulder at Sirius and Remus, before promptly disappearing into the throng with Lily. "Let's just do our shopping and find them later," Sirius huffed, put out. "Did you say you wanted books?" "Yeah," Remus nodded, distracted. "Can you smell that?" "Smell what?" Sirius asked, pulling Remus's robe in the direction of Flourish and Blots. Remus followed, but sniffed the air again. The trouble was, it was so hard to describe a scent, even to Sirius, whose own canine attributes sometimes surfaced even when he was in human form. "I don't know," he said lamely. "Just smells different than last time. The magic, it's probably just all these people." "You can smell magic?" "Oh, yeah, I can. Bloody hell." The bookshop was manic, but Remus didn't mind. He would have been content to wander the shelves all day, row by row, picking through and reading blurbs and stroking covers. He was having the best afternoon he'd had in ages, until he was interrupted. "Well, well, look who it is." Remus looked up and saw Snape standing only a few meters away. He reeked of sliver, so Remus stayed back. "What do you want, Snivelus?" he tutted, pretending to be unconcerned, returning to the book he was looking at. "You and your little band of delinquents might think you own the school, Loony Lupin," Severus tutted. "But you do not have any claim on Diagon Alley. I'm allowed to shop wherever I like." "Well, piss off and shop then." Remus shrugged, turning away. He was starting to feel sick, and he wanted Snape and whatever he was hiding under his robes gone. "You're in my way." Snape narrowed his cold black eyes. He began to advance on Remus, reaching over his shoulder for a book on potions. Remus's hands began to shake, so he put his book down and moved away, shoving his hands inside his pockets. Where was Sirius? "Feeling all right, Loony?" Snape smiled maliciously. "What are you doing with that much silver on you, you freak?" Remus choked, leaning back on the bookcase behind him, his eyes watering. "One can't be too careful." Snape purred. "You get all sorts round here." "All right, Snivelus." Sirius's voice came from just behind them. Remus sighed with relief as Snape reeled back, looking as though he'd been caught stealing. Sirius stepped out from behind the bookcase, arms folded. "Get lost on the way to Nocturne Alley, did you? Or maybe just in town for your annual hair wash?" "Fuck off, Black." "Oh, please, after you." Sirius made a sweeping bow, allowing Severus to stalk off, mumbling darkly to himself. Remus chuckled weakly. "Thanks," he said. "Are you okay?" Better not to worry him about the silver. Probably just Snape being his usual revolting self. "Fine," Remus smiled. "Come on, let's go and find the others, shall we?" "Don't you want to buy your books?" Nah, Remus shook his head. I just wanted to make a note of the names, see if Pince will order them into the school library for me. Free that way. Fair enough, come on then, mad in here. They had to push most of their way outside, and once they were out, Remus needed a breather and had to lean against the wall in the alleyway beside the shop. Are you sure you're okay? Sirius asked, tugging at a lock of his long hair, anxiously. Fine, Remus breathed, nodding again. The sickly feeling was receding now. He just needed a minute. Just the moon, probably. Still tired. What did Snivelus want? Oh, the usual nonsense. Remus screwed up his face. I don't think he meant to bump into me. What's Nocturne Alley? Over there, Sirius nodded across the street to another alleyway, slightly wider than the one they were standing in, which clearly led to more shops. It's where the dodgier types hang out. Dark wizards, banshees in disguise, vampires, that sort of thing. Oh, and werewolves. Remus knew this instantly. There was a very faint scent. Now he knew what to look for. Someone who had been there recently. Not Livia. James's dad was telling me they're planning a raid on some of the shops down there in the new year. Reckon they're stocking illegal supplies. Bet you anything it's where Snivelus snuck off to. Remus stared at Nocturne Alley for a while as he caught his breath. Whatever the strange new scent was, it was coming from there. He'd smelled something like it before, from Moody. Dark magic burnt around the edges, charred flesh. He shivered. Quality Quidditch supplies, he suggested. If James is anywhere, he'll be there. Good shout. Sirius nodded. Let's go then. They left the shadowy alleyway and stepped out into the bright winter sunshine. It hadn't snowed this year, but it was still bitterly cold, and the sky was clear, making the air fresh and crisp with energy. As they crossed the road, slowly past the gaggles of witches shopping with their children, the wizards stopping to pass the time of day, and house elves running errands for their masters, the energy seemed to change slightly. It made the hairs on Remus's stand-up neck like the arrival of a predator. He tensed and looked around. He caught sight of Lily and James looking at the latest broom in the window of Quality Quidditch supplies. He was about to turn and get Sirius's attention when it happened. Bang! The front of the leaky cauldron exploded in a plume of thick blood-red smoke, bricks and wood and glass flying out into the street. There was barely a microsecond of stunned silence before the screams started, wails of pain and terror and shock. The chaos around them seemed to expand and contract like a crashing wave. Crack, 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 people were apparating around them. Many were leaving, but a few were arriving too. These were the ones that made something deep inside Remus want to start growling. Bang! Another shop further up the street exploded too, then another, and... Get down! Sirius' full body tackled Remus to the ground, and they both covered their faces as Quality Quidditch supplies went up in smoke. Chapter 125, 7th Year, Christmas, Part 2. The ground shook, and Remus squeezed his eyes shut, belly down on the cobblestones. Everything after that moment, seeing Lily and James's heads turn before the building in front of them exploded, everything after that made so little sense. It was all too slow or too fast, and Remus found he did not react in his usual way. He was weak, frightened, his comprehension muddled. He felt stunned. They raised their heads, he and Sirius much too long after it had gone quiet, when people around them were already standing up and were shouting or crying. Someone was definitely crying, a woman. That seemed loudest of all, and someone laughing too, a thin, razor-sharp cackle in the distance. Pure joy. Diagon Alley looked like a bomb site. The shops which had been destroyed were like broken teeth in a gaping maw, strange blue patches of sky where something else should be. It was hard to see much on ground level, but they squinted through the settling dust further down the street towards Gringotts, where most of the noise seemed to be coming from. "You too!" a woman hissed, coming towards them from behind, picking through the rubble, her wand raised. "Get back! Behind me!" She stalked ahead. Her robes were deep maroon, an Aura's uniform. "James!" Sirius choked, his voice strange and strangled with terror. He scrambled to his feet, his robes all dusty and his hair full of soot. He half ran, half stumbled, towards the hole in the sky where the Quidditch supply shop had stood minutes before. "Sirius!" "No," Remus coughed weakly, following him, feeling stupid and heavy. "James!" Sirius was shouting, but so many people were shouting. "Sirius!" Remus coughed again, trying hard to keep up, but he'd bruised his hip when he'd hit the ground, and his ears were still ringing, and his eyes were starting to go blurry as he wiped away tears with dusty wrists. "Sirius!" "Mudblood's out!" Remus dropped to his knees, covering his ears, and he was not the only one. The voice seemed to be right behind him, inside his head. It was everywhere. The crowd was silent, finally, as everyone stared around, blinking, looking for the owner of the horrible, insidious voice. Whatever was going on, it was happening further away. Remus could smell magic now, and see beams of light firing through the dust clouds surrounding Gringotts. He could smell Moody and Ferox, maybe him, and the Death Eaters. Some of them he recognized, others he didn't, but they were there, and there were a lot of them. Where was Sirius? The ruins of the shop which had stood before them was still bleeding smoke, and Sirius had wandered straight into it, the idiot. Gritting his teeth, and with not a little pain, Remus pushed himself to his feet again. He had to find them. The shouts of battle were getting louder, more desperate. The woman who had ordered him and Sirius back had joined in, and Remus's conscience told him he ought to go and help. But James and Lily and Sirius... "Morse Maud," the same voice spoke, close and far away. The smoke filling the street seemed to writhe and darken, expanding and swirling upwards to form an enormous snake, entwined with a screaming, hollow-eyed black skull. "It's him!" a man near Remus shouted. "It's you-know-who!" Silencio! Someone else hexed him into quiet. An odd stillness, more flashes, blue, green, yellow, red, and then... Crack, 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 they were getting away. For the first time, Remus thought to withdraw his wand, fumbling about in his borrowed robes for it. As he did, his fingers brushed against something else, smooth and heavy. His fingers closed around his pocket watch, and he wrenched it out, prizing it open quickly and saying aloud, "Sirius Black." The needle did not even wobble, but pointed forward immediately, and Remus followed it towards the ruin of the shop. "Sirius? Sirius? Moony!" A hand grabbed his shoulder, and he whipped around desperately. "James!" James hugged him fiercely, and Remus didn't even think about how unusual it was. He was just so grateful and relieved. He hugged him back. Lily appeared at his shoulder, pale-faced, her hair falling out of its ponytail, clothes smudged with ash. There was a cut just under her hairline, dark blood oozing down into her left eyebrow. And Sirius, too. Thank God, thank God, thank God. "I lost you," Remus said hoarsely, once James let him go. One of the lenses in his glasses was shattered. "I'm sorry," Sirius said, sounding just as awful. "We'd better go and help," James said, shaking both their shoulders. "The battle's finished," Remus said. "They ran away, disapparated, most of them. How did you two—" He stared at Lily and James, still not quite believing his eyes. "Frank," Lily said, sounding much smaller than Remus had ever heard her. James wrapped an arm around her. "Frank's an aura. He used a knockback jinx on us right before the shop was hit, then Protego, I think. I didn't know what to do." Her eyes filled with tears, and James wrapped his other arm around her, enveloping her completely. "I didn't either," Remus said, as if it would help. "Didn't even get my wand out." Sirius was gripping his, though. He looked dreadful, fierce as a demon, eyes full of hatred. "I'm going anyway. They might still need help," he said. Remus grabbed him by the shoulders, surprising even himself with his strength. "Don't you dare!" he growled, meeting Sirius's eye. Something distinctly canine passed between them then, and Remus almost thought they were going to actually fight, and that it would be sort of a relief if they did. But of course James intervened. "Mooney's right," he said. "We ought to... Crack. Boys." "Dad," Fleamont Potter had arrived right next to James. He grabbed his son, then Sirius, then Remus, who had recovered enough now to find the hugging all a bit much, and then stared with horror at what remained of Diagon Alley. His bushy eyebrows knit, and he addressed his son. "Are you all okay? Your mother wants you back at the house immediately. She's been called to St. Mungo's, otherwise she'd be here." "Shouldn't we stay and help?" James asked, looking troubled, still holding Lily tightly to his chest. What a bloody hero, Remus thought. He still had Sirius by the shoulders, gripping him hard because he couldn't hug him. Fleamont looked at James and seemed to grow a few inches with pride. He smiled. "No, son, it's all in hand. Moody's there and Dumbledore's on his way. I just want you all home and safe before anything." "No one is to leave," a man was shouting, cutting through the crowd and the rubble with an authoritative stride. "Not until they have been questioned by— Oh, hello, Monty. Didn't know you were here." "Amos," Mr. Potter nodded at the ministry official. "Got here as soon as I could. Taking the boys home, they were out shopping and got caught up." "That's so." The official Amos came over to look at them all. "Names?" "Amos, is that really names?" he repeated in a harder tone. "Well, you know James. You've known him since he was 5, for goodness sake." Fleamont tutted. "And this is Miss Evans, I presume?" He glanced at Lily, who had stopped crying, but still looked very frightened. "Yes," she squeaked. "Lily Evans." "Evans?" Amos looked thoughtful. He pulled some parchment out of his pocket. "Evans. Parents' names." "You wouldn't know them," she said, her eyes darting between James and the official. "I'm Muggleborn." Amos looked down his nose at her again, then eyed James with a rude quirk of his eyebrow. "I see. Very well. And you too? Oh, ho, I know you. You're the Black Heir." "Was," Sirius muttered. He shook himself free of Remus and shoved his hands in his pockets, adopting a sullen, irritable attitude which always appeared when his family was mentioned. Remus wished he could tell him not to do that. It didn't make him look any less guilty. "He's coming home with us too," Fleamont said quickly. "Sirius has lived with us for well over a year now and—" Come, Monty," Amos tutted. "The Black Heir. I'm not stupid, and neither are you. He'll have to be questioned." "Absolutely not." Fleamont raised his voice. Remus had never heard him shout before. It was even more terrifying than a dark mark. "They're school kids, for Godric's sake." "Plenty of school kids on their side too, from what I hear." Amos said, "Plenty of blacks too." "I'm not interested in that. You can speak with Dumbledore if you have to, but I am responsible for these boys, and I am taking them all home right now." "What about you?" Amos suddenly turned on Remus, who blinked. Sometimes he forgot that the Potters included him in their responsibilities. "Remus," he said, trying to be brave but failing miserably. "What if this man knows something? What if he knows I'm a werewolf?" "Lupin?" Amos made a note, but asked no further questions. "You're all to wait here while I speak with Dumbledore." He said pompously, "Like hell we will." Fleamont snorted. "If you want to go and interrupt Albus Dumbledore while he assists in the investigation of a terrorist attack for the sake of a few frightened teenagers, then—" "Amos, someone— was it really Frank?" shouted from the distance. "Where the hell are you? We need you up here. It's Leo." The official turned sharply, and with a reluctant final glance at Sirius, he ran towards the voice. Mr. Potter leapt into action, taking no chances. "Quick, boys, are you all okay to apparate? Miss Evans, probably best you come with us for now." Lily nodded, and James kissed her, before they both disapparated together, hand in hand. Fleamont nodded at Sirius and Remus before vanishing with a loud crack himself. Remus looked at Sirius. Sirius looked at him too, still angry, still full of a hot desire for revenge. "Oh no," Remus said firmly, then, barely even thinking about it, grabbed Sirius's elbow hard and prepared to apparate with him. Sirius fought it, mid-turn. The stupid fool could easily have splinched them as he strained against Remus's spell, wanting only to stay where the fight was. But Remus was stronger. The air was full of fizzing, roaring leftover magic, and Remus drank from it, overpowering Sirius with the sheer weight of his own determination. They arrived on the Potter's front porch with such force their heads banged together, and they wrenched apart, panting, feeling scorched. "Fucking hell, Mooney," Sirius gasped, rubbing his elbow where Remus had grabbed him. "Had to stop you, idiot." Remus bent forward, hands on his knees. He felt completely drained, but buzzing with it, nerves alight with static. James opened the door. "Get inside," he said, "quickly." Sirius pushed past Remus without looking at him. Lily stayed for another hour or so, drinking cup after cup of tea, as Gully scuttled back and forth from the kitchen, wringing his little wizened hands and shaking his head woefully. Mr. Potter apologized profusely to Lily and hoped they would meet again soon under better circumstances, before locking himself away in his study. After that, they sat in silence for most of the time, with only the occasional outburst from James or Sirius. "Snape!" Sirius ranted, pacing back and forth. "We saw him in the bookshop. He threatened Mooney. He must have had something to do with it." "You don't know that," Lily said shakily, staring at the pattern of her teacup. "Did anyone see any of them, though?" "No," James shook his head, too busy trying to take cover. "No," Lily shook her head. "No," Remus said. Sirius looked up at him. "Mooney, you smelled something. You told me, remember? Do you know who—" "Remus, you can smell people?" Lily looked up, half shocked, half curious. "Like a scent?" "Not like... It's just a wolf thing. Instinct, but I don't..." Remus wished the ground would swallow him up. He could tell them, but he didn't want to break it to Sirius like this, not while they were furious at each other and frightened, and Lily and James were sitting right there. "Mooney," Sirius said, in a very low, dark voice that none of them had ever heard before. "Tell me, who?" Remus looked at James desperately for help, but he was just staring back, waiting. Lily, too, her mouth slightly open. He looked at Sirius again and tried to hold his stare. "I think Regulus was there, but lots of people where they're Sirius..." Sirius threw his hands up and left the room in utter silence. Lily gave a very tired sigh. "James," she said, "I think I'd better go home. Mum and Dad will wonder." James insisted on apparating back with Lily, then returning by himself. Remus wished he hadn't. He didn't want to be left alone. Alone, it all came flooding back into his mind, as vivid as a cinema screen. The noise, the smoke, the utter terror. And shame. He had not acted. His first chance to prove to Dumbledore and Moody and even Snivelus that he was on the right side and willing to fight for it. But he had never expected it to be like that, had never considered that when the time came and you were on a battlefield with the only people you love in the world, all he'd wanted to do was find them and run away. When James returned, he found Remus pacing, treading the same stretch of carpet Sirius had been earlier. "Are you okay, Mooney?" he asked nervously, taking slow steps forward, arms up, as if Remus was an untamed beast. "I didn't do anything," Remus muttered, still pacing. I couldn't move. I couldn't think." "Remus," James kept speaking in that steady, friendly tone. It was more soothing than Remus wanted to admit. Nobody could. It was horrible. It's the scariest thing that ever happened. Remus stopped dead and stared at James. He gave a half smile and shrugged. None of us knew what to do. "Sirius did," Remus challenged. "He was the one who got up. He wanted to help. Sirius never thinks, though, Mooney. You know that." "Oi, up yours, Potter." Sirius suddenly appeared in the doorway, arms folded. His eyes were a bit pink, but he didn't look angry anymore. Remus smiled at him, hopefully, behind James's back. Sirius smiled back, reassuringly. "I was going to say," James laughed, "that's what makes you so brave, you wanker. You just want to rush in and help, even if it's the worst idea in the world." "Yes, okay, it was not a good idea," Sirius said, sitting down on the sofa beside James. "At least you did something." Remus said, "At least you got up." "You got up too, Remus," Sirius said softly. "After you did," Remus shot back. "I was pathetic. How are we ever going to win this war if it's going to be like that? If I'm too scared to..." "I was scared too," Sirius said, looking up. "I'm not that bonkers. I was still bricking it, I mean. Fucking hell." Don't, James said, running his hand through his hair, still gritty with rubble. It took me so long to even figure out what happened, and all I could think about was getting Lily somewhere safe. I thought I would just do anything to make sure she was safe. There you are then, Sirius said firmly. That's how we win it. Mrs. Potter did not come back from St. Mungo's all night, but Fleamont stepped out of his office to tell the boys he had spoken to her and that she was all right, before asking Gully to make him a sandwich and closing the door again. Peter came over, white and shaking. He had heard the news. Apparently he had a cousin working for the Daily Prophet. There was no useful information, though. No death count yet. It hadn't been finalized. Peter stayed for supper, but James was the only one really able to keep up a proper conversation, and eventually Peter left. When Remus announced he wanted an early night, the other two shrugged and agreed to go up too. After showering and washing the dust and smoke out of his hair, he brushed his teeth in the cold, quiet bathroom and tried not to think about how odd it felt to be doing such normal things on such an abnormal day. He could hear Sirius and James murmuring quietly in the next room, solemn, tense tones. He decided to leave them to it. Hours later, Remus was seriously regretting that decision. He couldn't sleep. He waited and waited for Sirius to come until he realized that he must still be in with James and might not come at all. Remus lay on his back and tried to keep his thoughts from getting too loud. This is war, he kept thinking. This is what you agreed to do. You promised Dumbledore. You promised your friends. Finally, in the small hours when he was sick from tiredness and the first pink rays of sunrise were peeking around the curtains, his door opened. Sirius crept across the room with the stealth of a cat. "Remus," he whispered from the foot of the bed. Remus rolled over. "I'm here." Sirius practically flew at him, sliding in under the covers and burying his head under the duvet. They clung to each other, and everything steadied itself. Remus felt was calm at last. In a moment, Sirius moved slightly and whispered, "Tell me a secret. A nice one?" Remus paused. He kissed Sirius's hair. "I'm mental about you, too." Chapter 126, 7th Year, Christmas Part 3. Monday, the 2nd of January, 1978. The next week and a half was one of the darkest Remus could remember. When Mrs. Potter finally arrived home the day after the attack, she was white and drawn and hugged her family so tight as if she had thought she would never see them again. "About 50 dead, so I've heard," she said solemnly. "I was mostly triage, though, hundreds wounded." Any of us?" Mr. Potter asked. He looked as though he hadn't slept in hours, and indeed, as far as Remus knew, he had not been to bed either. Euphemia nodded, closing her eyes. "Later," she said, casting a glance at the boys. James looked indignant. "We can hear it," he said. "We're all of age, and we were there when it happened." "Yes, I know you were," Mrs. Potter shouted, her voice shrill. James's mouth snapped shut and he looked down, ashamed. Mrs. Potter got up. "I'm going for a lie down." She left the room, and the men sat in silence. "Sorry, Dad," James mumbled. "It's all right." Fleamont removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "We're all upset. Your mother and I need you boys to listen and do as you're told until it's time to go back to school. Do you understand?" They all nodded reluctantly, and Remus saw the muscles in Sirius's jaw tighten. It was a mark of his respect for Mr. Potter that he did not protest. "Now," Fleamont continued, "this house is going to be very busy for the next few days, and you're going to see a lot of very important people doing very important work. Do not ask too many questions, and do not make nuisances of yourselves." "Can't we help?" James asked earnestly. "Yes," Fleamont nodded, "by being gracious hosts and minding your mother." "Yes, Dad," James sighed, looking down again, obviously disappointed. "James," Fleamont began, reaching over to touch his son's arm. Remus and Sirius took that as their cue to clear the table and waited around in the kitchen, half-heartedly helping Gully do the washing up. "I don't see what the fuss is about," Sirius grumbled, elbow deep in soap suds. "If they knew half of the things we were capable of, we can actually help." "We'll have our chance," Remus replied, staring out of the window as he dried the plates. The garden was very dark, and a chill mist hung in the air, making it difficult to see much beyond the patio wall. He could just make out James's Quidditch hoops on the lawn and the dim, waning moon. He didn't like not being able to see very far. It made him uneasy. "That's all right for you to say." Sirius was still complaining. "You've already proved yourself." "What?" Remus glanced up at him, confused and momentarily distracted from the window. "With that werewolf you met last year, you've already faced the enemy and shown Dumbledore he can trust you." "I don't think I explained that properly, if that's what you think," Remus said. "Livia wasn't... It wasn't about the war. Dumbledore thinks it was, Moody does. They talk about the werewolves all the time, how useful you'll be trying to convince the dark creatures not to join you-know-who." "Can we talk about something else?" "Fine." They talked about nothing. They did the dishes in complete silence. Remus stared out of the window into the blackness of the Potter grounds and looked for something. Finally, James came in, just as they finished putting away the last of the china. "All right, mate?" Sirius asked cheerily. "Yeah," James shrugged, looking somehow wiser, older. "Just dad stuff, you know." Sirius and Remus glanced at each other, and Remus knew they were both experiencing the same sour envy. What did it mean to have a father like Fleamont Potter? To have one at all? "I said I'd give Lily a ring if you two fancied a walk into the village." "Why not?" Sirius said, leaving the dish rag over the tap. "Oh, Moony, Dad said to give you this." James handed over a small scroll of paper. Remus opened it quickly, glancing over the neat name and address written there. James cocked his head, curious. "What is it?" "Oh, nothing. Book I was asking about." Remus stuffed it in his pocket. "Come on, calls are cheaper after 6. James had finally learnt how to use the phone box unaided, so there was nothing for Remus to do but lean against the fence next to Sirius, waiting. He rolled cigarettes to pass the time. He cut the fingers off his gloves back in November for explicitly this purpose. "I didn't mean you," Sirius said quietly, "when I said dark creatures." "I know you didn't." Remus licked the Rizzler, then smoothed it down. He handed the completed cigarette to Sirius, who took it and put it behind his ear. Remus began another one. "Got to teach me how to do that one day," Sirius murmured, watching him appreciatively. "I bet we could work out a spell to do it instantly." "Probably," Remus sighed, lining up tobacco, "but I like doing it this way." "Fair enough." They were quiet again. Remus finished his second one and held it between his thumb and forefinger, wondering whether or not to smoke it. Mrs. Potter didn't like the smell on them, and he hated to add to her troubles, but on the other hand he could really use something to calm his nerves. Sirius could too, if the constant tapping of his leg was anything to go by. He was chewing his fingernails too. Remus lit the cigarette with a snap of his fingers and inhaled. Sirius followed suit, his legs stilled. "I am, though," Remus said on an exhale. "What?" "A dark creature, like you said." "Moony, no." "Yep," Remus nodded, gazing out at the fields before them and the motorway behind that. "So when you talk about wanting to prove yourself, I do understand what you mean. People trust werewolves just about as much as they trust the disgraced sons of dark wizards." "I do know. I didn't mean to act like you're the only one with a stake in this war?" "Yeah, like that. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "I know." Remus smiled, looking at him finally. "I'm sorry about Regulus." "Well," Sirius scuffed his feet in the gravel, "I already knew pretty much. Of course he was there. I'm going to work so hard on this Slytherin prank when we get back to school. It'll be my best work." Sirius laughed, an honest, abandoned noise, throwing his head back. "Godric Moony," he grinned broadly. "When you say things like that, it makes me want to snog your face off." "Ha!" Remus snorted. He shot a look at James inside the red phone box, jabbering away with a huge smile on his face. "Maybe not just yet." Sirius looked mournful again. "I'm going to tell him, just not with all this bad stuff going on, you know." "I know." Remus nodded. He did. He didn't want Sirius to know it, but the idea of James finally finding out about them was much scarier than he had prepared himself for. Why shake everyone up again? Remus, if I ask you something, will you tell me the truth? Okay. His stomach clenched involuntarily, but he steeled himself. What was the note from James's dad? It wasn't a book title, was it? No, Remus agreed. It wasn't. He reached inside his pocket and pulled it out, thumbing the soft, thick parchment for a moment before handing it over to Sirius. Sirius unfolded it quickly and looked down. Hope Jenkins? He read, a crease in his brow. What does that mean? It's a name, Remus said quickly. My mother's name and address? Oh, Sirius breathed, rereading it, still frowning. Your mother. He said the word as if he had never even considered the possibility that Remus had such a thing. Yeah, Remus took the parchment back, shoving it back into his pocket. I know we said we would talk about anything but mothers, but, well, Dumbledore gave me a letter she'd written me back after Lyle died. She said I could try to find her when I was of age, so Mr. Potter found her, I suppose. What are you going to do with it? Write to her? Yeah, I think I will. Sirius moved his hand on the fence, subtly brushing Remus's fingers. Well, I hope you find her. Mr. Potter had been right. For the next few days, the house was busier than Remus had seen it since the Christmas party of '73. Except, of course, there was very little cheer. These were the people closest to Dumbledore. Many of them were working for the ministry, but all of them were loyal to him before anything else. They were the front line in the war effort. Some of them were familiar faces, Moody, of course, who usually spared the time to cast a gruff nod at the 3 teenage boys who were now spending their days watching the fireplace for new arrivals. Then there was Frank Longbottom himself, just as pleasant and good-natured as Remus remembered. He came through most often with his girlfriend Alice, the young woman who had ushered Sirius and Remus back on the day of the attack. The pre-wet twins were another surprise. James and Sirius were falling over themselves to catch up with them and share every nefarious act they had committed at Hogwarts since the older boy's departure. They had both grown very handsome, broad-shouldered and rougher round the edges from a few adventures, but they still had their same easy tempers and wicked sense of humour. Often they brought their red-haired sister and her equally flame-haired husband. All of these guests only stopped to chat a few moments to James, Remus and Sirius before vanishing into Mr. Potter's study, or else heading out into the garden to apparate. Apparently Moody had placed a charm over the Potter's house, making it not only unplottable but impossible to place an apparition trace on. As a consequence, the living room and entrance hall began to feel very much like platform 9 3/4. In the evenings, Mrs. Potter would come home, looking worn out and determined. She would still have a smile for everyone and be ready to host whoever was in the house for supper. She was nothing sort of spectacular. The night before the boys were expected to return to Hogwarts, Moody, Frank and Alice were joining them for dinner, beef stew with dumplings. They were having a very pleasant evening. Frank and Remus were having a very intense discussion about defensive charms, and Alice and the boys, including Fleamont, were arguing over which Quidditch team was going to win the league. To Remus's left, Moody leaned over to address Mrs. Potter and whispered, I hear Ferox is getting out tomorrow. Getting out? Remus spun around, cutting Frank off mid-flow. Getting out of where? Moody raised an eyebrow, making his eerie magical eye bulge grotesquely. Bloody good hearing you've got, lad. Make a good aura. Remus shook his head impatiently. Professor Ferox? Yes, dear, Euphemia explained calmly. Leo Ferox was injured in the attack on Diagon Alley. He's now stable and will be going to stay with his grandmother for a while to recuperate fully. I'm sorry, I quite forgot he taught at Hogwarts. Did you know him well? Sort of. He was my favourite teacher, Remus said, his insides churning. Is he... What happened? Was he in one of the shops? He was on the ground in the battle with us, Frank said. He was in the thick of it. You couldn't fault his technique. He was firing spells better than anyone, but we all get unlucky sometimes. But he'll be all right. Remus put down his fork now. He wasn't going to eat any more. With proper rest, Mrs. Potter nodded, smiling wanly. All of the terror Remus had been trying to ignore for the past few days came crashing back. He gripped the seat of his chair and stared at his plate, and thought about Ferox lying unconscious in the rubble. A good, strong man like that shot down. Remus felt a stab of angry defiance in his gut, sharpening his focus. He was going to do better, no matter what it took. He was going to be quicker, braver. The next time the battle came to him, he would be ready. Chapter 127, 7th Year, Responsibilities. Monday the 9th of January 1978. Remus wrote 3 letters on his last night before school that Christmas break. 2 would need a muggle stamp and were to be posted into the red Royal Mail pillar box at the end of the road before they left for King's Cross. The second could wait until he got to Hogwarts and could use one of the school owls. The first was to Hope. Dear Miss Jenkins, my name is Remus Lupin. My father was Lyle Lupin, and I believe I am your son. I am now 17 years old. I was given a letter written by you in 1965. I hope that you do not mind my writing to you. If you would like to write back, I would like that very much. Yours sincerely, Remus John Lupin. He thought he had better sign off with his full name, though he would be very surprised if there was another Remus Lupin living in Britain. He also thought it best to keep it short and to the point. She would appreciate that, maybe, if she chose to ignore the letter. The second letter was to Grant. Dear Grant, I hope you had a nice Christmas. I wish I could have come to visit, but I stayed with my friend's family and it's hard to get away. I hope you're all right. How's the job going? Have you saved up for a flat yet? I'll have to start thinking about that soon. It's my last term of school ever, and by June I will be living in the real world. I hope I can see you then. Please write back as soon as you can and let me know how you're doing. Yours, Remus. He didn't want to put yours sincerely because it seemed silly and over-formal. He didn't want to put love because that seemed very extreme. So, in the end, yours seemed the simplest and most honest way to put it. So it's just the Ferox letter still to post, then? Sirius asked, as they took their seat in their usual carriage on the Hogwarts Express. They were completely alone. Peter had gone in search of Dorcas, who had apparently written him a very steamy letter over the Christmas break, while James and Lily had made a beeline for the prefect's carriage. Just the Ferox one. Remus nodded, patting his pocket. Sirius sat on the same bench as him, reclining back and stretching his legs out in Remus's lap, arms folded behind his head. Remus snorted indulgently. Make yourself comfortable, why don't you? Don't mind if I do. Sirius grinned wickedly. So, he said, which letter are you most looking forward to getting a reply from? Which reply am I most looking forward to? Remus quirked an eyebrow dryly. You mean between my battle-wounded ex-teacher, my young offender ex-boyfriend, or the mother who abandoned me? Well, when you put it like that, Sirius tutted. Honestly, the amount of stuff you keep back. Would you rather I was whinging all the time? Remus sighed, opening the book he'd brought for the journey on top of Sirius's legs. No, Sirius mused, staring up at the carriage ceiling thoughtfully. But I mean, if you didn't have me to talk to about this stuff, I'd be worried your head would explode. It would not explode, thank you very much. Remus slapped his knee lightly with the orange-covered penguin paperback. You're so dramatic. I coped perfectly well before you decided to involve yourself. How? Well, Remus chewed his lip. You'll think it's stupid. What? I make lists in my head, benefits and losses, and sometimes I have pretend conversations, to help me work through a problem. Bloody hell, Mooney, Sirius sat up, spluttering. You complete nutter. Remus laughed. Yeah, okay, maybe a bit mental. Sirius slid his feet off Remus's lap and sidled up to him on the seat. Ever had an imaginary conversation with me? No, Remus replied, closing his eyes as he felt Sirius's breath on his neck. I only have imaginary conversations with sensible people. Well, maybe that's where you're going wrong. Sirius began to kiss Remus very lightly just behind his earlobe. Remus squirmed, the book dropped to the carriage floor. Suddenly the door began to rattle open, and giggles could be heard in the corridor. Sirius and Remus leapt apart just as Marlene and another girl stumbled inside. Oh! Marlene's eyes widened in surprise, cheeks turning pink. Thought this car was empty? Nope. Sirius leaned back, looking amused. He was eyeing Marlene with a very wicked glint in his eye. He winked at the girl coming in behind her, a tall, dark-haired sixth-year Remus thought he vaguely recognized. Patel. Sirius nodded. Oh God, Remus thought to himself, could Sirius possibly have old conquests I don't even know about? Remus, have you met Yasmin? Marlene asked, taking a seat opposite him. She's the new keeper. Oh, right, hiya, Remus nodded, giving an awkward wave. No Mary. Sirius was raising an eyebrow at Marlene as if he knew something. Remus was just confused and a bit flustered. No Mary, Yasmin answered with a similar smirk. She's talking to one of the Ravenclaw prefects, Marlene said quickly. It's not as if we're deliberately avoiding her or anything. Marlene looked. Was she blushing? Why was everybody acting so oddly? Remus shifted in his seat, noting the weird atmosphere. Sirius said, still smiling at Marlene smugly. What were you two up to then? Yasmin tutted and looked him dead in the eye with a wry smile of her own. Nothing. What were you two up to? She raised a suggestive eyebrow, and Remus nearly leapt up with shock. She knew. Just who was this Yasmin person then? Nothing. Sirius sat up straight. Well then. Marlene shrugged, her face clearing as she settled back in her seat, looking like she had just won a particularly rewarding game of chess. We'll leave it at that then, shall we? Fine. Sirius leaned back too, folding his arms. Yasmin giggled, and Remus just scratched his head. What are we leaving where? He asked Sirius later that evening. They were making their way slowly up to the owlery before curfew. He'd eaten a lot at dinner and was somewhat regretting it now. Moony, really? Sirius laughed. Someone as observant as you hasn't noticed anything different about Marlene lately? I don't know what you're talking about. He panted, struggling as always with the spiral staircase. Remus didn't want to admit that if he was observant, it was only Sirius he was observing. He typically regarded the girls as a complete mystery and rarely had any idea what was going on with them unless they explicitly told him. Lily and Mary did this more often than Marlene, who had always been as private as he was. Oh, come on, Moony, Sirius laughed. Marlene and Yaz, don't tell me you didn't see. They were all over each other before they realized the carriage wasn't empty. Remus stopped, partly because he needed a moment to catch his breath, partly because he couldn't believe what Sirius was saying. You mean Marlene is... Yep. And Yasmin? Yep. Bloody hell. Yep. Sirius's eyes were glittering mischievously. Can't believe you hadn't figured it out already. Well, Remus huffed. They were nearly at the top now. I'm pretty impressed that you did, seeing as you apparently had no idea about me after we'd been shagging for a year. It wasn't a whole year, Sirius replied defensively, reaching the top and looking around furtively before continuing into the empty room. Remus came in behind him and looked for an appropriate owl. It wasn't a long journey, he didn't think. He seemed to remember Ferox telling him that his grandmother lived in Liverpool. It had been a difficult letter to write, but necessary, considering they had last parted on difficult terms. He simply hoped Ferox was well and added in a few inconsequential details about his newt preparation. So if Marlene knows, Remus said thoughtfully, tying the letter to his chosen owl's leg. Yeah, I know. James next. Sirius sighed. I don't mean to keep bringing it up. Remus said apologetically, setting the owl free to fly out of the nearest window. He watched it go. No, I promised I would do it. Sirius threw up his hands. Anyway, this term's going to be enough of a nightmare, what with newts and the war. Rather not have anything else to worry about. Are you nervous? Shitting myself. Lovely. Remus rolled his eyes. Can I help? Not if you're going to suggest me having an imaginary conversation with Prongs. Don't see why not, Remus shrugged. Prongs is easy to do, nice and predictable. Unlike some, Sirius murmured. Anyway, it's not what he'll say that I'm worried about. I know what he'll say. It'll be like it was when you, came out, Remus prompted helpfully. Sirius nodded bashfully. I know he'll be his usual righteous self. I'm more worried about the stuff he doesn't say. Well, Remus said, turning away from the window, there's nothing you can do about that. Black! Black! Oi, Padfoot! Sirius's pocket began shouting at him. Sirius grinned, fishing out his compact mirror and opening it. Speak of the devil! Where are you, Tosser? James's voice boomed out of the mirror. Owlery. Mooney with you? Yep. Dumbledore wants him. Right now? Sirius glanced up at Remus, whose stomach sank. This was never good. 1 hour later. Remus was not surprised to find all 3 marauders and Lily, who by this point may as well have her own nickname and access to the map anyway, waiting outside of Dumbledore's office for him. He was grateful. He was in such a state that if he'd had to walk back to the tower alone, he'd probably have got lost. Well? Sirius asked, eager as always to be the first to know. Said Remus. Come on, Lily said, taking his arm gently. You don't have to tell us, we just wanted to know you're okay. Of course he has to tell us. Sirius frowned. Remus gave him a warning glance. Can we go somewhere a bit more private? Not the common room? Dorm room, Peter suggested. Yeah, Remus nodded. He wouldn't speak to them until they got there, and used the time to work out exactly how he was going to explain without hurting at least Sirius's feelings, never mind wounding James's pride. Dumbledore hadn't said he couldn't tell anyone, only to exercise caution with who he told. For your safety and theirs, the old man had cautioned ominously. Remus still had serious doubts about whether or not Dumbledore was all that concerned for his safety personally, but kept his mouth shut. You had to be careful what you said in Remus's position. Finally, they all piled into the Marauders' dorm room, even Lily, which was a bit weird, especially when she sat herself down on James's bed as if she had done it 100 times before. Remus sat on the lid of his trunk, hadn't even had time to unpack yet. So? Sirius asked again, impatient, leaning against his bedpost. What did Dumbledore want? He gave me an assignment. Remus stared at the worn-out rug as he said this, not meeting anyone's eyes. He still couldn't quite believe it himself. He what? James surprised Remus by speaking first. He gave you not any of us. James, Lily said sharply, touching her boyfriend's arm. It's obviously something Remus is best suited for. Werewolves, Sirius said. Remus looked up and met his eye. He looked upset, so Remus smiled. Yeah, done it before, haven't I? You've done, Lily started, then shook her head as if thinking better of it. What does he need from you? Why now? They think there's one in Hogsmeade, Remus explained slowly. The centaurs told him, or something. He was foggy on those details, because when Dumbledore had been explaining it, Remus had been trying very hard not to throw up from nerves. Dumbledore wants me to, make my presence known. Next time I'm in town. See if it, takes the bait. Bait? Sirius practically shouted. It's just an expression, Remus replied. Not a great one, Peter said nervously, chewing his nails. Sorry. Remus shrugged. Don't worry about me. If there is a werewolf, and it's one of Greyback's, then I don't think I'm in any danger. He wants me to join him. Remember? Yeah, I remember getting my own invitation to join that side, Sirius said with a shiver. Remus wished he hadn't brought that up. The last image he needed in his head right now was Sirius's unconscious body falling out of the Potter's fireplace on that horrible night. It's not going to be like that, he said stiffly. Nothing might happen at all. They might not even be here for me. And I was okay last time, wasn't I? Only because Ferox showed up. Sirius had forgotten that they weren't alone. He was gearing up for a proper row. I know, but I'm of age now. I'll know what to expect. Remus tried to keep his own voice placid, hoping it would remind Sirius to keep himself in check. It's so dangerous, Remus, Lily started Slash. I know that too, but I wasn't exactly given a choice, he snapped. She lowered her head and pursed her lips. He hadn't meant to raise his voice to her, but he'd have to feel bad about it later. Just now it was too much to ask. When? Sirius asked, calmer than before. Next Hogsmeade weekend. That's in 2 weeks. James said, after the next moon. They're going to increase security in the village, obviously, Remus said. After last time. Okay, I'm going to need a few things explained here, Lily said, a deep crease in her forehead. "James, would you?" Remus pleaded. "I think I just want to go to bed." "Yeah, of course," James nodded, springing into action at once. "We can talk about this tomorrow, when everyone's had some time." "Thanks." Remus smiled, weakly, getting up, thinking to go and brush his teeth, looking forward to being alone in the bathroom for a few minutes to collect himself. "Mooney," James said quickly, as the others got up, "I didn't mean that you shouldn't get an assignment, or that you can't do it, or anything." "I know." Remus nodded, patting him on the shoulder. "Believe me, if you or Sirius could do it instead, I wouldn't be Dumbledore's first pick. Suppose I just got lucky, eh?" Inside the locked bathroom, he pressed his back against the door and tried to regulate his breathing. Now that his friends knew, it all became much more real to him. The thought that had been gnawing away at him since Dumbledore had first described the task finally sank in. You never actually thought he would ask this? Remus chastised himself. You never really believed you would be useful. Be careful what you wish for, Loony Lupin. Dizzy and trembling, he now pressed his ear to the bathroom door. They had all left the room, all but one. He wrenched the door open without a second thought and stood face to face with Sirius. "You okay?" Sirius asked, his cool blue eyes full of concern. Remus shook his head. "No." Sirius reached out and Remus clung to him. Chapter 128, 7th Year Preparation, Tuesday the 9th of January, 1978. "Right, Mooney?" James marched into the great hall the next morning, carrying a pile of books he could barely see over. He slammed them all down on the breakfast table in front of Remus, disrupting the porridge he had been picking at. He didn't have much of an appetite somehow. "What are these?" He reached over to pick up the nearest book, Advanced Defensive Spells. "Potter!" Lily straightened her back, staring over the pile with a look of bemusement. "Have you been in the library in the morning instead of flying?" "We need to get Mooney prepared, Lily." "But you said mornings were sacred to you," Sirius said. "You said you had to pay homage to the gods of the Quidditch pitch." Peter grinned. "I can miss one morning," James said dismissively. "Prongs!" Remus grabbed his hand and gushed at him dramatically. "I'm touched." "Get off!" James snatched his hand back, ears turning bright red. "You can all stop making fun of me. Am I the only one taking this seriously?" "Hey!" Sirius smirked. Remus and Peter groaned in anticipation of what was coming. "I am always serious." Peter and Remus covered their eyes in embarrassment, but it must have been the first time Lily had ever heard that joke, because she snorted with laughter so suddenly that her tea shot out of her nose. This was the funniest thing that even the Marauders had seen in ages, and they were all hysterical for a good 5 minutes. Each time any of them managed to stop, Lily would snort again, or James would waggle his eyebrows, and they would be helpless with laughter once more. When they'd finally calmed down, Remus opened the first book eagerly and decided that he would eat his porridge after all. They went to their lessons with a new sense of purpose, and James suggested that they all meet in the library after the last bell to begin work on preparing Remus for whatever was ahead. They did this every day for a whole week, commandeering a block of 6 desks behind some stacks in a corner, where they could have complete privacy, pushed them all together and covered the thing in textbooks on battle theory, dueling techniques, defensive incantations and hexes. Peter even made a threatening sign which read, "Marauders War Council, do not disturb," which worked like a charm, possibly because it had been literally charmed by Lily, and meant they could leave their work there and return to it whenever they liked. Remus abandoned his study groups, asking Christopher to take over. James nominated Marlene to take over 2 of his Quidditch sessions, and even Lily stopped going to Slug Club meetings that week. Though she did try to break into Slughorn's study to get her hands on some Felix Felicis for Remus, but had no luck and was almost caught. In short, all 5 of them spent as much time as possible working towards the same cause, preparing Remus for his mission. He had been teasing James before, but Remus really was touched. Only there was hardly any time to dwell on it, as they all knuckled down to study harder than any of them ever had before. Remus just thanked his lucky stars that James was so good at defense against the dark arts. They'd never had a teacher stay longer than a year in that subject, so Remus's own knowledge was patchy. James and Lily's combined efforts helped him cover more ground in a week than he had since his owls. "You're good at charms, and that's half the battle," James said appraisingly as they stood in the empty common room one evening. "The rest is really just quick thinking and determination." "And we know you can do those," Lily encouraged, tidying up the mess they'd made, trying to freeze sofa cushions mid-air. "It won't be like Diagon Alley," Sirius reassured him, slapping him on the back, "because you'll know what's coming. You've got time to get ready." "Easy enough to say." Remus bit his lip. "I'm okay at most of this here with you lot, but if I was actually defending myself, and I still can't do a Patronus—" "Don't worry about that now. Just focus on the simpler stuff," James advised, rubbing his chin. "The Patronus will come. It's not as if you're not strong enough. You apparate like it's nothing." "That's easy," Remus sighed. "That's just thinking. Patronuses are feeling." "Could somebody please let me down now?" Peter called from above their heads, where he had been paralyzed mid-air. "Dear Remus, thank you for writing to me. My Christmas was good. I never had turkey before. It was nice. No flat yet, but I am trying. Still staying with my aunt, as you will see from the address, but I like it here. I like the sea, and may learn to swim. I've been seeing a lad down here, but he ain't as clever as you. Nice body, though. I miss you very much. Your Grant XX. Dear Remus, thank you for your letter. I was so pleased to hear from you. I would like to begin by assuring you that I'm quite well following the events in Diagon Alley over Christmas. I was sorry to hear that you and your friends were there too. I had hoped the war would be long over by the time you were ready to leave school. I will be staying with my grandmother for a while longer, but expect to be back to work no later than Easter. I've no doubt you will understand why I can't say any more than that. Best of luck with the new teas. Elferox, Sunday the 15th of January 1978. By the following weekend, they had definitely hit their stride, and Remus was feeling more confident than ever, as long as he didn't think too much about Livia's incredible ability with wandless magic. He tried to convince himself that he was prepared if anything, that Dumbledore had merely required him to show his face in Hogsmeade, to see if this other wolf, if there even was another wolf, sniffed him out. He might never use anything James had taught him at all. Yeah, right. That nasty voice in the back of his head spoke, always late at night when everyone else was asleep and he was most alone, as if you've ever been that lucky. They spent all day Saturday in the library, all 5 of them, but on Sunday, Lily was required mediate a prefect dispute, and Peter had an afternoon detention for poor uniform. So for a good portion of the day, it was just Remus, James, and Sirius working in their quiet little study nook. Sirius and James were on the blacklist for the restricted section, so Remus went in alone and came back with the biggest book on curses he could find. There are some second years on the other side of the hall taking bets on whether we're really behind studying for newts or just planning the most amazing prank Hogwarts has ever seen, he said, setting the huge tome down on top of 3 more. "I'm so proud of our legacy, aren't you, Mr. Prongs?" Sirius smirked over the book he was taking notes from. "Quite so, Mr. Padfoot, quite so," James replied, scanning a glossary. "Aha!" He grabbed a book triumphantly and began flipping pages. Sirius looked up. "Found something good?" "Maybe," James murmured, reading fast. Remus began to look at the contents of the Book of Curses. The chapter titles were truly horrible, and he hoped he'd never actually have to use any of this stuff. "Okay," James said. "Look at this." He had finished reading and flipped the book to show Remus and Sirius, who were on the other side of the table. "I really think this sort of thing plays to your strengths, Moony. It's all intuitive stuff with a lot of punch behind it, the way you do pranks." Sirius and Remus both stood to pore over the book, leaning forward on the desk. Remus's shoulders were still so sore from the last moon. The pain-free days between moons seemed to be getting shorter the older he got. His tendons felt like hard, knotted rope rubbing against the bone. He stretched to rub a particularly sore spot while he read, pressing down with his fingertips and breathing in slightly at the pain. Sirius moved closer and, perhaps without thinking, reached out to rub the sore spot with his own long fingers. He was much better at it than Remus, who felt a wave of relief as Sirius worked small, soothing circles into his muscle. He sighed tiredly. Remus was the first to finish reading and looked up at James. The bespectacled young man was not looking at the text, though. He was staring at them across the table, specifically at the point where Sirius's hand was touching Remus's neck. James's mouth had fallen slightly open, and there was a question in his eyes. Remus moved to alert Sirius, who finally looked up at his friend. Seeing immediately what he had done, he just stared back, still for a moment. Remus half expected him to step away, withdraw his hand, but he didn't. Instead, Sirius wrapped his arm around Remus's shoulders and squeezed him very deliberately, all the while holding James's gaze. James closed his mouth, looked at them both again, and nodded wordlessly. Remus straightened up, letting Sirius's arm drop. He had to leave them alone, that much was obvious. He cleared his throat. I'm sure there's a book I've read which goes into more depth than this. I think I've got a copy upstairs. I'll, just go and get it. See you in an hour or so, maybe?" Sirius and James nodded, still staring at each other. Remus left quickly, glad the library was almost empty. He felt hot and cold all over, a feeling similar to guilt, even though he knew he ought not to feel it. Halfway to the tower, he bumped into Lily. "Hiya, Moony," she grinned. "Seen Potter?" "Library," Remus said. "But I wouldn't if I were you. He and Sirius are having a chat." "Oh, I can interrupt a chat." She started off. Remus touched her arm quickly. "Lily, no." He bit his lip. "Sorry, but I really think you ought to give them a bit of time. Sirius really needs it, okay?" "What's happened?" Lily looked startled by his seriousness. Remus sighed heavily. Well, she was about to find out anyway, and it was as much his to tell as it was Sirius's. Come with me. Shall we go outside?" "Okay." Lily followed him, looking curious and concerned at the same time, a little crease forming in her freckled brow. Outside in the crisp winter sunshine, everything seemed a bit cheerier. Remus steeled himself, stomach roiling. He had to keep reminding himself that he'd been wanting this, to have it all out in the open. Only now it seemed utterly terrifying. They wandered towards the lake. Remus gazed across the surface, squinting against the reflected shards of dazzling light. "Remus?" Lily asked. "You're making me nervous." "Sorry," he blinked. It's about me and Sirius." "You and Sirius? Oh no, what have you done? Only you two could get in trouble during the first week back." "No, it's nothing like that," Remus laughed, despite himself. He rubbed the back of his head, casting around for the right words. "Look, you know how you're always saying I should find someone?" "Yeah." Lily frowned again, searching his face. Remus raised his eyebrows, waiting for her to get there. It took longer than he'd expected, but her eyes widened suddenly. "Oh, my God!" She covered her mouth with her hands and sat down rather suddenly on the nearby stone bench. Remus sat beside her, slowly, his joints stiff. "Sirius," she said. "Sirius," he nodded. "Oh, my God." "Yeah, sorry." "No, Remus, don't be sorry. I just... Wow, okay, give me a minute." He did, waiting patiently, looking out at the lake. He didn't look at her, because it didn't matter. Lily would be okay. Lily would take it in her stride. "And he feels the same way? You're sure, Remus?" "Couldn't be surer." Remus smiled. It was suddenly very easy to smile. He pulled his cloak and the neck of his jumper aside covertly to show her the reddish-purple bruise Sirius's mouth had left there a few nights before. "Oh, my God," she said again. He covered it up, blushing but still smiling. "Does James know?" "He's finding out right now. That's why I wanted you to give them a bit of space." "Yeah, no, of course." She nodded. "I understand. I've wanted to tell you for ages." "Ages? How long has it been?" "Since the summer. Well, it got serious over the summer, but we were, well, there was stuff going on for a while before that, since Sirius broke up with Mary." "Bloody hell." She shook her head again. "So what? Sirius is your boyfriend? Are you in love with him?" Whoa, Remus blinked, shuffling away. I mean, steady on, let's just, Look, it's out now, and that's plenty. Lily gave him a very long, appraising stare. Then she nodded. All right, then. Remus raised his eyebrows. All right, then. You said it's serious, though. He's not just, it's not just messing about. No, definitely not. I know it's unexpected. Lily shook her head and looked at him with big, earnest eyes. Are you happy? Yes, without hesitation. All right, then, she said briskly, back to her sensible self. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. Look, I didn't take divination because it's bollocks, but I'm pretty sure we're all in for a really crap time quite soon. My God, you sound more like James every day. It's ridiculous. Remus snorted. She slapped his knee lightly. Listen to me. It's going to be hard, and it's happening faster than I thought it would. It's going to be scary all the time for a long time. But if we can keep being happy together and making each other happy, then good, brilliant. If it's serious for you and you for him, then brilliant. Jesus, Evans. Remus buried his face in her hair, pulling her into a huge hug. Lily and Remus waited another half an hour or so before returning to the library, where they found that the books had all been taken out, and James and Sirius were gone. Remus didn't have the map on him, but fortunately Lily knew James, and they headed straight for the Quidditch pitch. Sure enough, two familiar figures were racing through the air between the goalposts on their brooms. James was winning, but not by much. Remus could tell by Sirius's posture that he was pushing as hard as he could. He hadn't seen him concentrating like that on flying since being kicked off the team. Lily and Remus sat companionably in the lower stands and waited, rehearsing a few basic defense spells. So last time I met a werewolf, Remus was saying, I still can't believe that happened. Lily shook her head, amazed. Ferox showed up and fired some silver chains at her, so she apparated pretty quick. I could try that, but I'm only okay at transfiguration, and what if the silver backfires and gets me? Yep, there might be a potion that helps with your silver problem. Lily chewed her quill. I'll ask Slughorn, but otherwise it might not be worth the risk. Fair enough. Thud, thud. Two sets of heavy boots landed before them. James and Sirius stood panting and sweating, both clutching their brooms. Lily twirled her hair around her finger and tilted her head, and Remus fought not to do the same. All right, lads. She broke the ice. They nodded. Needed a break, Sirius explained apologetically. Change of scenery. Remus looked up at James nervously. All right, Prongs? He asked, just managing to keep the tremor out of his voice. James looked at Sirius, then down at Remus. He shook his head, looking down, and reached an arm out, yanking Remus to his feet. Come here, you big prat, he boomed, enveloping him in a bear hug. Chapter 129, 7th Year, Instinct. You told him, Remus kissed Sirius as soon as they were alone. Well, he worked it out, Sirius said, laughing as he was pushed backwards into their bedroom. Lily and James had to head a prefect's meeting, and Peter was still in detention. Remus had dragged Sirius upstairs as fast as he could, all aches and pains forgotten. But you told him, Remus insisted, running his tongue up Sirius's neck, collarbone to earlobe. Sirius shuddered, and the backs of his knees hit the bed frame. Remus gave him a shove that was half urgent, half playful, and they fell back together. Merlin! Sirius gasped as Remus continued his assault, climbing on top of him, a knee either side of Sirius's hips. If I'd known this was how you'd respond, I'd have told Prongs ages ago. Shut up! Remus kissed him hard on the lips, hands on Sirius's belt. Sirius obeyed. Remus was a bit surprised too. Who'd have thought that confession was such a turn-on? If he wasn't careful, he'd be telling everyone he met. So, he said half an hour later, sitting by the window in his boxers, lighting a cigarette. Sirius lay on the bed, still vaguely stunned and staring at him. It went well? Sirius blinked very slowly, as if his eyelids were heavy. Remus grinned, exhaling smoke, trying to aim it through the crack in the window. James, what did he say? I think the first thing was, what the fuck are you playing at? But it got better from there. Sirius snorted. Did he ask lots of questions? Sort of. Nothing I didn't expect, I suppose. What about Evans? She said, "Oh my God," about 100 times, but she came around fairly quickly. Prongs too, except the Pratt won't tell Wormtail for us, says we have to do it. Well, fair enough. Remus sucked on his cigarette again, then blew smoke into the room, watching it fill the space between them. What questions did he ask? Sirius closed his eyes, breathing in. Nothing scandalous. How long for? When did it start? Why didn't I tell him? That sort of thing. What did you say? I told the truth. Roll us a fag? Remus already had. He held it out. Sirius rolled onto his stomach and reached his long, pale arm through the smoke to take it, placed it between his pursed lips, and snapped his fingers. He sucked, then rolled back, exhaling with a sigh. "How'd you feel?" Remus asked, unable to tear his eyes away. It still seemed miraculous beyond belief. Sirius Black, naked in my bloody bed. Right now? Bloomin' marvellous. Sirius winked wickedly. About Prongs? Okay, good, I think. He stretched, hand disappearing under one of the pillows. What's this? Oh, Remus blushed, jumping up from the window. I got some letters back. Ferox is okay, and, Grant. Sirius's lip curled as he picked up the postcard Grant had sent from Brighton. It had a colour photo of the pier on the front. The sea looked blue and the sun was shining. Remus was so glad he had sent it. It was nice to picture Grant in a bright, cheerful place like that. Sirius continued smoking as he read it. He's seeing someone with a nice body, but he misses you. Remus jumped onto the bed and snatched the card away, raising it aloft so Sirius couldn't reach. He's seeing someone with a nice body and he misses me. Separate statements. Well, Sirius folded his arms, lying back again, stiff puffing. I hope you're writing to him about my gorgeous body. Of course, Remus laughed, laying back down beside him. They stared up at the red velvet bed curtains together. You're not really jealous, are you? Remus asked tentatively. Pff, no. Sirius nudged him gently with his elbow. Curious, maybe? About... What do you think, you and him? You've never told me any detail. We were 15, there was no detail, just snogging. Remus tutted. Honestly, what a thing to ask. James did about us. He never. Well, he didn't, but I knew he wanted to. No, he didn't. You're just being vain. Remus leaned over to stub out his cigarette in the cold cup of tea on his nightstand. Sirius caught him at the hip and pulled him over. Remus closed his eyes and let himself be pulled. Thank Godric I had the map. I would have gone to the library. Merlin's balls! The door flew open, and Peter stood gaping in the doorway, clapping his hands to his eyes. Remus leapt up from the bed as if Sirius was on fire, and began scrabbling about for his trousers on the floor, shouting, sorry, Pete, shit, shit, shit. What the fuck? Peter shouted back, still covering his eyes. Sirius yanked the duvet up, staring at them both, then burst out laughing. Wormy, we've got something to tell you. Friday the 20th of January, 1978. Peter took a little while to get used to it, but then they all did, really. Even Remus and Sirius. They kept forgetting that the marauders knew, and they'd grown so used to consciously avoiding each other that they were oddly shy to show any sort of affection in front of the others. Of course, Remus kept reminding himself, it was better to keep a low profile anyway. They still had the rest of the school to worry about. You could tell Christopher, though, Sirius said as they left the library for the last time before the Hogsmeade trip. It was almost midnight, and they'd had to be chased out by Madam Pince, who wouldn't let them stay any longer, even when Lily and James had flashed their head girl and boy badges. Oh, now you remember his name, Remus yawned, clutching his books to his chest, really just for something to hold on to. I'm just saying. Sirius caught the yawn and covered his mouth, but continued speaking. He already knows half of it. No harm telling him the rest. Not really fair to let him keep pining away for you when there's not a chance in... Sirius Black, are you jealous? Lily cackled, giggly with overtiredness. No, Sirius sniffed, nose in the air. I just don't want any misunderstandings. Well, if I survive tomorrow, then I'll think about it. Remus yawned again. That made everyone go quiet, and he regretted saying it. They walked back to the common room in solemn silence. Gryffindor Tower was peaceful and mostly empty. A few stray second years up past their curfew fled to their dorms as soon as they saw James and Lily, and the marauders took their usual seats by the fireplace. Remus settled into his armchair and immediately returned to the book he had been reading before Pince had so rudely interrupted. Sirius flicked his wand at the kettle hanging over the fireplace, and Lily summoned some clean teacups from the cupboard, but still no one spoke until the water was boiled and the tea brewing in its pot. "Moony," Sirius said softly, "put down the book, eh? We've done so much already." "Doesn't feel like enough," Remus replied, feeling prickly and irritable. "I know I'm missing something." Everyone kept staring at him, and by now he didn't know whether it was because they were amazed or repulsed about the whole Sirius thing, or whether they were convinced he was about to run away and join the werewolves. "It's loads," James said, now pouring the tea and handing Remus a saucer. "Honestly, you know enough now to walk any defense against the dark arts exam. Might as well bunk off the rest of the year." "This isn't an exam," Remus snapped. The cup and saucer shook in his hands, so he set it down on the arm of the chair. He had a feeling Sirius had noticed that, but hopefully no one else. "But Moony," Peter slurped his own tea noisily, "you've done this before, last year." "Exactly," James nodded encouragingly. Remus sighed and said no more. What was the point? Whinging wasn't going to get him anywhere. He sipped his tea, willing his hand to stay steady. This was potentially the worst time of the month for a mission, he couldn't help thinking. Only 4 nights away from the full moon, and his magic felt stronger than usual, but also less predictable. He was restless, his skin crawling, his senses bare and his mood hot. He knew he was forgetting something. He just knew. A dark feeling of foreboding that told him all the curses in the world would be no good. He stood up sharply, knocking the teacup off the armchair. Sirius was quick and stopped it mid-air with a flick of his wand. Remus ignored this. "Going to bed," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Okay, Moony," James nodded brightly. He glanced at Lily. "Think we'll stay down here for a bit?" Peter looked at Sirius and then Remus with an expression of faint terror. Remus tutted. "It's okay, Wormtail, I really am just going to sleep. See you all tomorrow." He didn't sleep. His brain wouldn't let him. He hated Dumbledore, and he hated Greyback. He hated the war, and as the hours got smaller and smaller, he hated Peter too. He did not hate the other werewolf, though, the one who was not Greyback, just as he had not hated Livia, though she frightened him. The more Remus thought about what was ahead of him, the less sure he was about his preparedness. Yes, he knew more curses and hexes now than Regulus and Severus combined, probably, but the more he thought back to his encounter with Livia, the less useful these things seemed. Hadn't she said it herself? "You can wear that uniform and wave your silly stick, but you know that you have more in common with me than anyone in that castle." He knew she was stronger than him. She could hurt him if she wanted to. But she hadn't, not really. Instead, he remembered the pity he had felt immediately after their meeting. He remembered the desire to help her, and his conversations with both Ferox and Dumbledore. As dawn broke, Remus lay wide awake, thinking at 1,000,000 miles an hour, his heart hammering and his stomach fizzing with excited anticipation. If he had to go to war, then fine. But this was his battle, and it would be on his terms. It was an April morning when they told us we should go. As I turned to you, you smiled at me. How could we say no? Oh, the fun to have, to live the dreams we always had. Oh, the songs to sing, when we at last return again, slipping off a glancing kiss to those who claim they know. Below the streets that steam and hiss, the devil's in his hole. Saturday, the 21st of January, 1978. Breakfast that morning was a bleak affair. Remus was ravenously hungry, but no one else seemed to be eating. Sirius was on black coffee, and it was already making him jittery. He kept bobbing up and down in his seat. Mary and Marlene were the only ones acting halfway normal, because neither of them knew about the assignment. 3 broomsticks later? Mary asked brightly. Lily and James nodded, trying to smile, and succeeding only in looking slightly deranged. They were holding hands under the table again, and Remus was trying not to think about it, instead reaching for the plate of bacon for another helping. "Can I bring Yaz?" Marlene was asking Mary. Mary raised an eyebrow. I suppose." "Great!" Marlene grinned. Mary's mouth twisted, but she didn't say anything. The walk into Hogsmeade seemed longer than ever. Fortunately, Lily and James had duties to perform, so at least they weren't following Remus about, just waiting. Unfortunately, Sirius had enough nervous energy for 3 people, and Remus could feel it coming off him in waves. "Where shall we go?" he murmured, low enough so only Peter and Remus could hear. "Everywhere, I suppose. Would it help if I was Padfoot?" "If you like." "Shall I change too?" Peter asked. "If you like." Remus was unable to summon up very much interest. He was too busy trying to work out whether or not Hogsmeade smelled genuinely different, or whether it was because he usually tried to ignore scents as a human. They ducked into a shop alleyway, and Peter and Sirius transformed behind some bins. Wormtail crawled onto Remus's palm, and he sat him on his shoulder. The weight was a small comfort, even if his whiskers tickled Remus's neck. Nice to have Padfoot too, big and black and excitable, trotting alongside like a loyal companion. Yes, much better when your friends aren't human, in Remus's opinion. At least right now. They walked. Remus deliberately avoided the high street, instead wandering around the backs of the houses. How many people lived in Hogsmeade? How many were potentially in danger without even knowing it? He tried sniffing the air, and it was like exercising a muscle he had allowed to atrophy. Some scents came through stronger than others. Padfoot, obviously, and Wormtail. Household waste from the bins, compost from back gardens, and magic. That heavy, iron taste which settled on his tongue like treacle when he was this close to the moon. Other students, the sickly sweet aroma of honeydukes and the comforting smell of parchment emanating from scriven shafts. The forest. He could smell the forest if he really tried. He closed his eyes briefly and inhaled. Green, lush, dense, teeming with life and magic. At first it seemed like an indulgent whim, just an idea that he rather liked the smell and wanted to get closer. But the further they walked and the closer they got, the more important it felt. Remus had the impression that something had been drawing him in this direction for some time now. The forbidden forest loomed large over the little village, miles and miles of darkness and danger, against a backdrop of blue-grey, snow-capped mountains. For the first time, as a human anyway, Remus had the urge to go in, to explore. Padfoot whined beside him as they left Hogsmeade and the road behind them. He wondered if Sirius could smell it too, but it was impossible to get any kind of sense out of him in dog form. Remus tried to switch off his rational mind for a moment. Was there anything there at all, or was he just overthinking? The magic in the forest wasn't the same as at Hogwarts. It wasn't human. It didn't have that metallic gunpowder smell Remus had come to associate with most witches and wizards he knew. It was more organic, less precise, a heady, mulchy smell of soil and decay. There was power in there. He knew this instinctively. Dizzying, huge, earth-moving power. It would have been frightening once, but the closer Remus grew, the surer he was. The power was his if he wanted it. All he needed to do was let it in. Another scent revealed itself, an animal, blood. Remus felt the wolf inside stir, and his desire to enter the forest grew almost impossible to resist. Padfoot barked sharply and ran in front of him. The great black dog turned on Remus, raising its hackles and emitting a low growl. Remus blinked, snapping back into himself. Wormtail was speaking and quivering on his shoulder. Maybe had been for a few minutes now. "Sirius?" Remus frowned. "Move!" Padfoot continued to growl. Wormtail gave another squeak before scuttling down Remus's robes into his left pocket. Remus felt hot and angry, as if something had been snatched from him that he wanted, that he needed. He made to move forward, and Sirius transformed back into himself. "Where are you going?" he said, still blocking Remus's way. "Can't you smell it?" Remus stopped trying to get past and caught Sirius's eye. "Can you?" he whispered, not quite believing it. "There's something bad in there. It must be the wolf." "It is." Remus nodded eagerly. Surely that was obvious. I can't be sure, though. Sirius frowned. I can, Remus replied. Let me past. Sirius moved again, blocking him. No, he said. You've done what you said you'd do. We know it's there. Let's go back now. Remus stared over Sirius's shoulder into the dark, wintry wilds beyond. He wanted this so badly, more than he'd ever wanted anything, except, maybe, the boy standing before him. I have to, he finished. It was an insufficient explanation, but it was all he had. There you lot are. Where's Pete? Sirius and Remus's deadlock was interrupted by James's cheerful shout. They both turned to see him striding towards them from the village, Lily at his side. What are you doing all the way out here? Thought you were supposed to be trailing your scent all over town or something. Yeah, we're just coming back now, Sirius said, which Remus thought was pretty cheeky, not to mention presumptuous. You lot can, Remus said. I'm not. Not what? Lily asked, confused. Where is Peter? Remus could feel the warm weight of Wormtail's furry little body in his pocket, but said nothing. James had been agonizing for months over when to break the animagus thing to his girlfriend, and now was definitely not the right time. I'm not coming back with you. I have to go in there. He pointed at the forest, aware of how mad he sounded. You what? James looked concerned. His eyes flicked to Sirius automatically, which only annoyed Remus even more. Sirius wasn't his keeper, for God's sake. The wolf's in there, Sirius explained, and Mooney's gone completely mental and decided he has to go in and face it right now. Remus's head snapped back to Sirius, outraged and betrayed. I have not gone mental, you prick, he said fiercely. How could he explain that this was just what had to happen, that he knew it deep in his marrow, at his very core? You lot go back or wait here. You won't understand. Help us understand, Remus, Lily came forward, gently. This isn't like you, barreling into a fight. Remus nearly laughed in her face. Did no one remember who he was, what he was? I'm not going to fight anyone, he said. I just want to talk to them. That's what I'm supposed to do. They were all staring at him, unconvinced. His anger flared again, and he had a very unpleasant thought, that he could very easily get past them if he wanted to. The magic in the forest was more than enough. It made him feel strong. He could force his friends to stay in place, and it wouldn't even tire him out. He probably wouldn't even need his wand. This notion burned so brightly it frightened him. He looked at Lily again, refusing to look at Sirius or James. We were wrong. This isn't a battle, and I'm not a weapon against the werewolves, he tried to explain. I'm a way in. They need to know I don't mean any harm. But Remus, if they're on you-know-whose side. They're not, he snapped. Not all of them. Lily looked uncertain, and Sirius was practically burning a hole in the back of Remus's head with his indignance. Remus ran his hands through his hair. They weren't going to understand. How could they? He barely did. Look, he said, this is important, and I need you all to trust me. It wasn't a request, and nor was it received as one. James and Lily looked at each other, then at Sirius. James nodded. Okay, Mooney. Sirius made a noise of protest, but Remus was too far gone now to care. He would make it up to him later, when he could think clearly, when every instinct in him wasn't telling him to run into the forest at full pelt. Okay, he nodded back. Stay here. A tug in his midriff as the magic took over. He would never be sure whether or not he had done it on purpose, and at the time he simply did not care. He turned and began to walk into the forest quickly, his long legs making long strides, his friends behind him, unmoving, unable to follow. Chapter 130, 7th Year Caster. It was easiest not to think, for the next few minutes at least. Remus did not slow down or tire as quickly as usual. Even his hip had stopped hurting. Despite the wheedling guilt he had to keep at bay, he had not felt so good in months. The scent grew stronger as the woods grew thicker, and a shade of darkness fell, casting strange shadows which seemed to move in the corners of Remus's eyes. He didn't think. It was too late to think. He was too far gone. Bloody hell, a voice in his head popped out of nowhere. When you go for it, you really go for it, don't you, sweetheart? Grant. Remus didn't want to do this now. Shut up, he willed his brain. Oh, charming, Grant's voice cackled. Here I am, only trying to help. Don't I always try to help? And I don't need help. If you didn't, I wouldn't be here, Grant's voice countered. I could be someone else, if you prefer. Lots of sensible people to choose from. I've got Ferox here. Want to chat with him? Or Lily, though she's a bit whingy, if you ask me. Dumbledore? Nah, bit of a prick. Ooh, how about your posh boy? Eh, Moony? Shut up, Remus repeated, walking faster, breathing harder. Yeah, Grant's voice agreed slyly. I can see why you wouldn't want to talk to him after what you just done. I had to, Remus insisted. None of you would understand. Well, they won't now, you lunatic. Remus ignored the voice. There was no time for this. He would just have to deal with the consequences later. He knew there was no coming back from it now, not really. Hope you like the woods, Remus, Grant was whispering. Now, 'cause no one's going to want you back in civilization after that mess. Shut up, shut up, shut up! Remus raged inside his head like a mad person, like someone deranged. Perhaps it had been a mistake to go alone. Perhaps he really had lost it, and his friends were only trying to keep him safe. No, he caught the scent again, and it stirred up his insides so much that he felt as though he was being propelled by it, dragged forward, unable to resist. It was a feeling he had only ever associated with transformation before, and he had no more control over it in his human form than the wolf did. It was him, the other wolf, somewhere out there. Remus had to find him, or else, well, he wasn't sure, but it wasn't even worth considering. Something moved just ahead, and Remus froze. The different scents of the forest began to pile up. He had to concentrate to identify and categorize each one. There was magic. And there was a different kind. It wasn't the wolf, it was female, or feminine at least, and not lupine at all. He walked towards it, confused. It was very close, but he couldn't see anything. He found himself in a grove of silver birches, spindly, ghostly white trees with papery bark that glowed in the darkness of the woods. The scent was strong, but still nothing, and he had lost the wolf's trail. Impatient, Remus pulled out his wand and cast a revealing spell. Apparicium! His wand seemed to jump in his hand. The force of the magic was so strong. An anguished wail filled the air, and the tree closest to Remus was no longer a tree, but a young woman, a dryad. She was beautiful in her own way. Slender and tall as the trees she guarded, her skin glowed as white as silver bark, and her hair rustled with brittle, wintry leaves. She rounded on him, bearing sharp yellow teeth, and he staggered back, shocked and amazed. "Go away, nasty thing," she hissed, eyes narrowing. They were the colour of new spring leaves, unnaturally bright and fierce. "I dealt with the other. I'll deal with you too." "Which other?" "The other half-beast," she glowered. The dryad was at least a head taller than him and advanced at a steady pace, roots unfurling from the soles of her feet and winding towards him. As dreadful and fearsome as she was, Remus had to stay focused on his goal. "I'm looking for him. The other. I mean you no harm, or your, trees." "Wizards do not belong here." She continued to scowl. "Even half-beast wizards. Get out!" "I will as soon as I've—" "Nasty, cruel, wicked creatures, foul, unnatural, don't belong, too dangerous." "It's not a full moon," he insisted. "I'm not going to transform, I swear." "Not wolf," she rasped, very close to him now, ivy and nettles winding their way towards him, covering his shoes. "Wizard, wolf is welcome. Wolf is natural." "Oh." Remus didn't have a response to that, and the vines were tickling his ankles now, stinging him as they tightened. He still had his wand. He still had every curse he'd spent the last 2 weeks practicing. But now that the time had come to use them, Remus's conscience pricked. The dryad was only doing what she was supposed to do, guarding her trees. "Please," Remus said, holding his hands up, hoping he looked deferential. "I promise I won't hurt you, or anyone. I just need to find the other wolf. Then I'll go. I really will." "Lying, false-tongued, dirty." "I swear." "And the little one?" "What? Who?" Close up he could see that her face was not smooth like human skin, but finely lined and cracking like bark, coal-black beneath the tissue-thin outer layer. She gave another harsh wail and raised her hand. Remus flinched, but she didn't touch him. Instead, there was a violent shaking inside of his robe pocket, and Wormtail came flying out, falling to the mulchy ground below with a soft pat. Shit, Remus thought. Bloody Peter. The Dryad raised her arm again, and Peter transformed into his human shape, trembling and cowering on the ground. Please, please don't hurt me, he whimpered, covering his face. Remus stepped in front of him quickly. Of all the people to have at your side in a situation like this. Liar! The Dryad hissed again triumphantly, leafy hair bristling. Deceitful, filthy wizards! She was raising both arms now, and her eyes had darkened to the colour of pine needles. Remus was now completely sure that she meant them serious harm. Every one of her pointed little teeth was showing. He couldn't disarm her. She didn't have a wand. He wasn't even sure if the usual defensive spells would work on her. Remus had just decided to use a knockback jinx to buy himself some time when... Confringo! Peter squeaked from behind him, pointing his stubby little wand over Remus's shoulder. Oh, Jesus Christ, Remus thought as he ducked reflexively. Fortunately, Peter was either so frightened or just inept that the blasting curse didn't have its usual devastating effect. Still, it was enough to cause some serious damage to the trees behind the Dryad, setting a few leaves on fire. She screamed a heart-wrenching, painful screech and turned immediately to tend to the smoking branches. Peter and Remus took their chance and ran, vines snapping as they tore their feet from the ground. Peter followed Remus, but neither of them were especially fast runners, and by the time they judged it safe to stop, they were both wheezing heavily. Bloody hell, Pete! Remus panted, bending forward, one arm against an oak for support. I didn't know what to do, Peter replied, red-faced, pale hair plastered to his forehead. Let's go back, Remus, please. He looked around anxiously. They were even deeper in the woods now, and other than their own laboured breathing, it was deathly quiet. Still, Remus shook his head, straightening up. No, he said, I have to find them. She hurt him. So what? Peter replied, indignant. We're not supposed to be here. Look, I'm sorry you got caught up in this. Remus frowned impatiently. Now that they weren't in immediate danger, his desire to hunt the other wolf down had returned. He could smell blood, he was sure of it. But I have to. You can go back if you want. Go and find the others. Peter looked behind him, then back at Remus, his eyes big and shimmering. On my own? The tremor in his voice was palpable, and Remus suddenly wanted him gone more than anything in the world, in case the terror was catching. I'll give you my watch so you don't get lost, Remus offered. No, Peter stiffened his lips. I'll come with you. Pete's heartbeat was almost deafening, and Remus was starting to feel sorry for him. It's okay, he whispered. If something happens, you can just transform back and go and tell the others, can't you? You'll know the way better. As a rat. I won't leave you, Remus, Peter whispered shakily. I can be brave. I know I can. Remus squeezed his shoulder. Fine, this way. Keep as quiet as you can. The Dryad had not come after them, thank goodness. Remus couldn't remember everything about tree guardians, but he was fairly sure they couldn't leave their groves. Or maybe that was naiads. He couldn't remember the difference, but it didn't matter now. He'd picked up the scent properly, a mouth-watering, rich iron tang that made his stomach growl shamefully. They were still days out from the full moon, but that didn't seem to matter to the wolf inside Remus, who was scaling the walls of its prison, howling for freedom. It's close, Remus whispered to Peter as they pressed through a heavy thicket, probably announcing their arrival to every creature nearby. There was another heartbeat not very far away, and that sounded frightened too. A few steps more, and Remus could hear laboured breathing, like someone who had been struggling for a while now and was beginning to tire. Closer still, and he could smell the sweat and the rage from this struggle. It was such a strong mix of emotions and energy that Remus was momentarily lost in the fog of it, too overwhelmed to see a clear direction. Then it changed, stilled suddenly. A harsh voice rang out, shattering the quiet of the woods, shaking birds from their nests. Remus Lupin. Peter gave out a sharp squeak of terror before leaping a foot in the air, transforming and turning tail, scampering away from Remus. No matter. Remus stood taller. "I'm here," he whispered back. "Come to me." That tugging sensation returned to Remus's chest, and he followed it, letting himself be drawn forward, through to a small clearing of trees. At its centre was an ancient yew, gnarled and creaking, and bound to the trunk was a young man. The dryad had him tied in place with miles of cruel twisted bramble. The thorns were cutting into his worn leather cloak and puncturing the skin of his neck. His arms were at his sides, and despite obvious attempts to free himself, the brown, sinewy stems held firm. He wasn't struggling now, though. He was just staring at Remus, head bent forward, eyes dark and inscrutable. His head was shaved, as Livia's had been, and his clothes were weather-worn and threadbare, but there the resemblance ended. He was tall as Remus, and perhaps only a few years older. His skin was as dark as tanned leather, his features handsome and striking. He smiled slowly, showing rows of straight white teeth. "Remus Lupin, set me free." "Who are you?" Remus held back, gripping his wand inside his pocket. "I am Castor. Set me free. I am your brother." Remus cocked his head. This man was trapped, utterly at Remus's mercy. He felt his courage returning. "My brother, are you? Greyback send you?" "Yes." "Well." Remus leaned against the nearest tree and folded his arms. "You're going to have to give me a decent reason to set you free then, aren't you?" Castor roared furiously, fighting against his bonds once more, tearing his clothes and driving the thorns deeper into his neck. He was clearly very strong, with a broad build, thick biceps flexing against the vines. "Oh dear," Remus tutted conversationally. "Looks like you're not going anywhere without me." He would later wonder where this ridiculous sense of cockiness had come from. After all, the situation Remus now found himself in was every bit as dangerous as the attack on Diagon Alley, which had turned his mind inside out. Perhaps it was the woods and the power he could feel coursing through him. Perhaps it was Grant's voice still ringing in his ears. Perhaps it was simply the familiarity of the situation. Remus had been facing off against bullies who thought they had him figured out since he was 6 years old. "So," he said, smiling, "want to talk?" "I was sent to talk." "Really, just talk?" "Just talk. Set me free." Remus played with the tip of his wand thoughtfully, as if he hadn't a care in the world. "See, I've got a bit of a problem believing you, Castor, mate. Seeing as the last time Greyback sent someone to just talk to me, an innocent woman ended up dead. My father recognizes his mistake in sending Livia," the werewolf said earnestly. He had calmed down a bit now and was clearly watching Remus to see where this was going. "So, this time he has sent me." "I can see right through that too, you know," Remus mused. "Thought a good-looking bloke might, pique my interest, did he?" Castor kept staring at him, eyes narrowing. Remus shrugged and continued. "I mean, I'm flattered, Castor, don't get me wrong. I'm sure you're lovely, but I'm still not interested. And I have to say, so far I'm not very impressed. Not as good at magic as your pal Livia, then. She'd have apparated right out of that, no trouble." "That tree bitch," Castor snarled, struggling again. "Whatever she's done, these vines, I can't use magic." "Oh, I see." Remus nodded. "Well, must remember to thank her next time I see her." "Livia told me about you," Castor said. "She said you're Dumbledore's pet hound, toothless, wouldn't hurt a fly, wouldn't chase a rabbit on a full moon." "I'm nobody's pet," Remus replied, his jaw clenching. "And nor should you be. What's so great about Greyback, eh? What do you lot think's going to happen to you when we defeat Voldemort?" "The same thing that always happens to our kind," Castor replied, giving Remus a pitying look. "We will be hunted and oppressed." "Don't you want to change that?" Remus implored, taking a step forward. "Don't you have a family in the real world? Don't you want a family one day?" "We are a pack, we are everything," Remus sighed. "You don't understand, he's lying to you. I know there's a way to make things better, to really change the way we're treated, but it can't be like this, don't you see?" Castor sneered at him disdainfully. "Just as Livia said, toothless. Told father you weren't ready. Told him it was too soon." "Too soon for what?" For the big night, of course. Castor was smiling again, a sinister grin which made Remus feel queasy. The werewolf continued, recognizing Remus's uncertainty. On the night of the next moon, the pack will be on the hunt. It will be a hunt such as the world has not seen since the Dark Ages. Why are you telling me this? There was a quaver on Remus's voice now, as much as he tried to disguise it. You know I'm going straight to Dumbledore. Castor laughed, a breathless, hollow sound coming from deep in his chest. Perfect. Crack. Remus winced as the air around them shimmered slightly, and he staggered back from the figure who had appeared between them in the clearing. She hissed, low under her breath, steely eyes flicking from Remus to Castor. Livia. Sister! Castor rasped, straining for freedom once more. Release me! You have failed our father, she replied. Punishment awaits. No, Castor protested. It was the Dryad. I could not. Livia raised a hand, and Castor was silenced, unable to move or make a sound. Remus's insides froze as she turned on him. Hello, my love. Are you ready? Remus pulled his wand out and pointed it at her, assuming a dueling stance and rooting himself to the ground. She would not hold him this time. This time he knew what to expect. I'm not going anywhere, Livia. There isn't time for this. The moon approaches. She tutted, walking towards him, as ragged and filthy and wild as he remembered her. Drop that silly stick. She raised a hand and twisted it mid-air, as if she was turning a doorknob. Remus felt the strength of it, prying his fingers apart, his wand burning in his hand, but this time he did not drop it. He clenched his teeth and gathered every ounce of magic from the woods around him. No, Remus Lupin. She growled, You will come with us. She raised both arms now and flicked her fingers so that they fanned out from her palms. The trees surrounding Remus caught light in an instant, from trunk to branches, blazing columns of fire roaring around him. He was terrified, but he was not letting go. No, he repeated, stepping backwards slowly. He would run if he had to. Let the Dryads deal with them. Let the centaurs do it, come to that. You didn't just show up in a forest like this and start burning it down. Livia snapped her fingers then, and at once Castor was freed from his bondage, gasping and snarling. He joined his packmate, and now there were two of them, their eyes glowing like hot coals, reflecting back the flames surrounding them. The time has come, Remus Lupin, they said in unison as black smoke began to fill the air, the scent of sap and pine fizzling around them. No, he said again, though he could see no way out now. Mordeo, he shouted, aiming his wand at them as he backed away. Castor recoiled, growling, but Livia laughed throatily and waved her hand again, dismissing the curse as if it was no more than a cobweb. This was it. They were going to take him, God knows where, and make him one of them. He would never see his friends again, never see Sirius again. He had been such an idiot, forcing them to stay behind. Now there was nobody left to protect him. There's you. Remus didn't recognize this voice. It wasn't Grant's or anyone he'd spoken to before, but maybe it was right. There was a spell he hadn't considered, simply because he had never mastered it properly. But he was in dire straits now, and he had more power than ever before at his disposal. As bright embers and burning leaves rained down on the three of them, Remus gathered all of his resources, his strength and his rage, and every joy in his heart. He would have to be ready to run as soon as the incantation was spoken. If it failed, he would have no time at all to make his escape. He breathed in carefully and, just before he cast the spell, recalled Sirius's eyes and Sirius's mouth and Sirius grinning. I'm mental about you. Expecto Patronum! He practically screamed it, extending his arm, directing his wand as an enormous silver animal burst forth, leaping towards Livia and Castor, huge jaws wide, claws bared. In the split second before he began to run, Remus saw them both cover their eyes and turn to run in the opposite direction as the great beast lunged at them. But there wasn't time to stay and enjoy his success, so he didn't. He ran again for the edge of the woods, back to Hogsmeade and the wizarding world and his friends. Remus ran so hard that his legs were burning, and the pain in his hip was like a spear in his side. But he did not stop. Lungs full of wood smoke and eyes watering, he just kept going until the trees began to thin and the light grew stronger. Peter and Sirius were still there. Sirius was pacing erratically back and forth on the footpath. Peter was sitting on the ground with his knees drawn up, staring at the woods. He looked as though he had been crying. Remus staggered out into the daylight and felt ready to collapse right there. Peter stood up, wiping his eyes in disbelief, and Sirius ran towards him and then stopped suddenly and was knocked back as though he'd hit a wall. Furious, he gave out an angry grunt. Remus allowed one of the knots inside him to unravel, and the barrier was lifted. He limped towards his two friends, wheezing. "Sorry," he murmured. Much to his surprise, Sirius threw his arms around his neck and held him tightly. His heartbeat thrummed against Remus's, and he hugged him back, exhausted and grateful. "We couldn't come and help," Sirius said, his voice hoarse and hollow. "Whatever you did, we couldn't follow you." "I'm sorry," Remus said again. "I'm so sorry, Remus," Peter suddenly burst out, his eyes filling with tears again. "I'm so sorry. It's okay." Remus reached out an arm to pat his shoulder, but Sirius wouldn't let him go yet. Finally, Remus came back to his senses and gently untangled himself. "I have to see Dumbledore right now. Where are the others?" "They had to go back," Sirius explained. "Curfew. They said they'd tell McGonagall." "Good," Remus nodded. "Come on, we have to go now." He began to hobble towards the village. "Moony, are you okay?" Sirius hurried alongside him, an arm under his shoulder for support. "Just tired," Remus said. "You're covered in... Is that soot? There was a fire. Wormtail said something was summoning you." I can't explain it yet. Please don't ask me." "Fine." There was a cold edge to Sirius's voice which Remus didn't like, but he kept supporting him, and he kept going, so it would have to be ignored for now. One thing at a time. McGonagall was waiting for them at the school gates, her arms folded, deep lines creasing her forehead. "Professor," Remus spluttered, still coughing up smoke, "I'm sorry we missed the curfew, but I need to see the headmaster, right?" "Yes, of course, Lupin, come with me." McGonagall nodded quickly and took his arm from Sirius. She peered down at Sirius and Peter. "You two go to the tower and say nothing. I don't want any arguments, do you hear me?" The two young men were so surprised by these sharp instructions that they both nodded and left immediately, Sirius throwing one glance back at Remus. He told Dumbledore almost everything. He told him about the scent and the Dryad and Castor, about the fire and the plans Greyback had for his pack and Livia. He did not mention the barrier he had somehow conjured to keep his friends back. Nor did he explain that he had known how dangerous it would be, or that he had ignored every ounce of good sense he had in order to pursue Castor. Dumbledore seemed very pleased nonetheless. "Everything you have told me is immensely useful, Remus," the old man said, smiling across his desk at Remus, with eyes twinkling with pride for the first time Remus could remember. "You were very brave and fulfilled your task admirably." I did? Even though I went in the Forbidden Forest? You followed your quarry, and I don't see that any harm has come to you. You are clearly a formidable wizard, like your father." Remus felt a very small twinge of pleasure at that, which put him more at ease. "This attack, though, the hunt they're planning—" "Let the Order deal with that." Dumbledore shook his head, placing his hands on his desk and rising to his feet. "You have done quite enough, more than anyone could expect of a 17-year-old wizard." "Yes, but if I can—" "I am sorry I asked this of you, Remus." Dumbledore came around his desk and placed a friendly hand on his shoulder. "I hope I will not have to ask again." "I'm on your side," Remus replied, feeling he ought to reiterate this. "I'll do what has to be done." Dumbledore's eyes glittered with triumph, and his grip tightened on Remus's shoulder. The fire had been put out by the Naiads, according to McGonagall, who walked him from Dumbledore's office to the infirmary. There had been no trace of Livia or Castor, and it was assumed they had apparated. Madame Pumphrey tutted over him, cleaned off the soot and administered a pain-killing draught. By then he was breathing normally again and perversely quite fancied a cigarette, though he didn't tell her that. Food was brought to him there, because by this time he had missed dinner, and he ate a pleasant, quiet supper in Madame Pumphrey's homely little office. Thankfully, he was permitted to walk back to Gryffindor Tower alone. His friends were all waiting, not in their usual place by the fire, but in a quieter corner near one of the far windows. They were all speaking in serious, hushed tones, and their heads turned at once to face him as he appeared through the portrait hole. He walked over, a bit woozy from the draught he'd taken, and they made room for him to sit in the window seat, squashed between Lily and Sirius, who quickly squeezed his hand before letting go. They all stared at him and waited for him to speak, so he did. He told them as much as he could, and a few things he hadn't said to Dumbledore. Peter had luckily already covered the Dryad, and apparently the Marauders had spent much of their evening explaining the Animagus secret to Lily. Still, she covered her mouth in horror when Remus talked about encountering Castor and Livia's incredible powers and the fire. Sirius was practically quaking with rage beside him, but held his tongue the whole time and let Remus finish. "Bloody hell," James said once the story was told. "Well done on the Patronus, though, mate." "Thanks." Remus blushed slightly. Trust James to find something praiseworthy in all of that. "Did you see what it was?" "No," he said quickly. "It happened too fast." Not long afterwards, they all trailed up to bed, one at a time, each of them with their faces set in a determined mask. Remus realized that he was not the only one who had had a very trying day. He took a quick shower to get the last of the forest off him, and brushed his teeth without looking in the mirror, too afraid of what he might see there. Sirius still hadn't tried to talk to him or confront him about the terrible betrayal back at the forest edge, but Remus was certain this was yet to come, and though he knew it would be hard, he looked forward to clearing the air. For hours he lay in bed, waiting and hoping. Sirius always came to him on a night like this, if something had happened. Sirius always knew when Remus needed to talk. Even when Remus didn't want to, Sirius could get it out of him and make everything right again. Remus waited for a long time. "Come on," he thought to himself. "I need you. Where are you?" "He ain't a mind reader, sweetheart." Grant's chirpy voice broke through once more. "He knows me, though." "Oh, yeah? You ever told him?" Remus declined to answer because it was no longer necessary. Working through problems in your head using imaginary role-play was all well and good, but that's what he'd done when he'd felt most alone, when he thought he'd had no one else to turn to. He realized with a sickening sense of shame just how stupid he'd been. Without wasting another moment, he slid out of bed and crossed the floor. He parted Sirius's bed curtains and whispered into the darkness, "Sirius!" "What?" Sirius was lying on his back too, hands folded over his middle like a tombstone effigy. His coldness made Remus flinch, but he swallowed his pride. "I need you." Sirius turned his head at once. He sighed and pulled back the covers. "Get in." Remus scrambled inside eagerly. They lay next to each other, on their sides, staring at each other. "Do you hate me?" Remus asked. "No," Sirius replied, voice still empty. "I'm really sorry. I wanted to protect you all." "I know, that's what James said." Sirius's voice had melted slightly and was now more petulant than angry. "But it's no excuse," Remus continued. I wasn't myself. Do you understand?" Sirius shrugged, moving the bedsheets so that they slid off his shoulder, exposing his collarbone. Remus tried not to get too distracted by that and licked his lips, meeting Sirius's eye again. "I'll tell you everything," he said. "You told us," Sirius replied tetchily. "Not everything," Remus replied. "There are things I don't want everyone to know about, but I want you to know, if that's okay." Sirius stared at him as if he couldn't believe his ears. A small smile WS creeping onto his face, and he was obviously trying to suppress it. "Go on, then." So he did. He told him every feeling he had had, the irresistible pull into the forest, the rugged power of natural magic, the terrible guilt. By the time he had stopped speaking, he realized that Sirius had reached out to him and was stroking his arm gently, back and forth to comfort him. "What made you think of casting a Patronus?" Remus snorted lightly. It's stupid. Voice in my head. Ah, not like the normal voices, though. Usually it's someone I know. Maybe this time it was just you. Remus thought about this. It made him feel funny. Sirius was still watching him, still stroking his arm. Remus remembered something else. It's a wolf, my Patronus. I didn't want the others to know. I don't want them to think. They'd never think badly of you, Moony. They know you too well. Do they, though? After today, I just feel so stupid. I got so caught up I didn't know what to do. I just kept getting in deeper and deeper. But you did the right thing in the end, Sirius said firmly, gripping him now. That's all that matters. He leaned forward and kissed Remus gently on the lips, a calming gesture. You came back to us. Remus looked down, lowering his voice to barely a whisper. He looked up at Sirius again, meeting those perfect blue eyes. I came back to you. Sirius kissed him again, harder, and did not stop for a long time.